The story opens in a hospital where doctors struggle to save a life. The protagonist, later revealed as engineer Jane Lishan, knows he is dying. He recalls his past, blaming his heart disease on overwork. His childhood was tragic, losing parents in an accident and growing up alone. For 20 years, he worked tirelessly for low pay, unable to afford transport, living in darkness, even though doctors tried to save him. He only wished for peaceful rest, believing suffering would end. But unexpectedly, he opened his eyes again. He saw a luxurious room, mistaking it for a VIP ward and fearing costs. Before he could adjust, a mysterious screen appeared, introducing the magical land Aldera. Still dizzy from pain, he looked in the mirror and was shocked by a flawless new face. Within a week, he adapted to this strange existence. He realized he had been reborn as Rain Edgar, third son of Duke Alferia. This life was the complete opposite, without burdens or hardship. His new status was truly that of a noble heir. Siblings pampered him as the family's treasure. He had never known hardship since childhood. As the youngest darling, he was cherished and respected. Rain realized fate had flipped his life from misery to rare fortune. He then discovered this world was called the Ancient Continent. Everyday life here revolved entirely around magic. It held the capital of the Caradorial Empire, the mightiest human nation. Many other races also existed, such as elves, dwarves, and countless legendary creatures. The Ender family, his place of rebirth, was a renowned power ruling vast lands and people. With noble status, Ryan enjoyed luxury and personal maids. He still could not believe fate had given him an ultimate privilege package. One day, Maid Leah informed him his father urgently wanted to see him. He entered his father's office, where the butler announced him, and the Duke granted entry. Before sitting down, Rain impatiently asked why he was called. Alferia asked instead if he could guess the purpose. Rain admitted he had no idea. Alferia solemnly declared that his son had grown, and it was time to manage his own territory, with the right to choose it. Hearing this, Rain was overjoyed and asked eagerly. His father only smiled knowingly. He explained this was the family's tradition. At maturity, each must govern land. The territory assigned to Rain was in the northwest, distant but more stable than other troubled regions. However, that area lacked mages, had unstable food supplies, while the empire's future was uncertain due to royal decline. Rain reflected and agreed with his father's words. The imperial court was indeed weakening day by day. Nobles often held more power than the royal family, causing chaos. Rain realized the root lay in corruption and treasonous collusion of great houses. Though living in luxury after rebirth, he knew true value was family bonds and protecting loved ones. The Duke still considered his son too young and inexperienced, so he didn't force too much responsibility. Rain suddenly asked if solving famine would improve order in the northwest. Alferia sighed, saying food issues were extremely complex, needing long time and not easily fixed. But Rain had his own ideas, though his father saw him as a naive child. With knowledge far beyond this era, he was confident to manage food supplies. The story shifted to a northwestern city, surrounded by threats. Duke Soren to the north, elf roots to the west, and the southern Great Sea. As a result, the city constantly suffered wars, leaving the land in ruins. Poverty spread. Population shrank from endless wars, until even enemies lost interest in attacking. On his way to the new land, Rain was filled with worries. He thought an industrial revolution was needed to revive the desolate city, but such a great task required abundant manpower, while the population was pitifully scarce. The remaining people were thin, weak, and unable to work heavy labor. Ryan understood the first step was attracting new settlers to spark growth. Fortunately, he had just gained an advantage from the updated system. It was the stat scan skill, allowing him to see each person's potential. Of course, Rain tested it immediately on family members, to measure the limits of this new ability with which he could find talents and filter out troublemakers, paving way for breakthroughs. At that moment, Maid Leah noticed her master's pensive look. She remembered the Duke's order: watch Rain and prevent trouble in the new territory. Inwardly, Leah only prayed he wouldn't act recklessly, lest both suffer disaster. The scene shifted to Esling City. Lord Eldrick held an emergency meeting, announcing that the Duke's son was coming, so shady dealings must be paused. An advisor reassured that Ryan was just the youngest son, surely lacking life experience. But a masked man interrupted coldly, warning not to act without orders from above. The city lord still felt uneasy, fearing his scandalous past might be exposed and leave him cornered. The masked man sneered, saying the young master couldn't understand financial records. Fake reports would fool him, yet warned against carelessness. The city lord agreed, and the masked man urged preparing a smooth trap for Rain, with Eldrick nodding repeatedly. Elsewhere, someone reflected on Alfaria's past mistakes now burdening the next generation. At that time, Rain stopped before the city gates, surveying the land that needed revival. He noticed fertile soil left abandoned due to the absence of farmers and settlers. Ryan asked Leah for a regional map to study. Studying it, he realized the key. Digging canals from the sea could revive the area, but his calculations were interrupted when a horrific cry rang out nearby, breaking his thoughts. A girl pleaded with her father to stop gambling away the money meant for her mother's treatment. But the father remained cold and indifferent. He shouted for her to hand over money, convinced one more bet would win big and change their lives. The girl wept, exposing his empty promises and blaming his gambling for ruining the family. Hearing this, the father raged and raised his hand to strike her. But Ryan appeared suddenly, landing a thunderous punch that knocked him out instantly. The blow was so strong that Rain's own hand throbbed painfully. Leah rushed over, scolding him for acting rashly instead of ordering guards, and he sheepishly promised to be more careful. Rain then gently asked about the girl's situation while considering how to deal with the father. He sternly condemned the man for gambling away treatment money and abusing his daughter. The man trembled and demanded to know who Rain was to meddle in family affairs. Rain replied that identity was unimportant. What mattered was how the man would act from now on. He warned gravely, if gambling continued, the man would pay with both body and future. Terrified, the man burst into tears and fled, swearing never to gamble again. Ryan watched him vanish and smiled, finding intimidation as easy as teasing a chick. He opened the system to check the girl's status. She approached gratefully, thanking him profusely, saying his intervention gave her mother a chance to live. The system revealed her name as Lillian Aldry, 17, healthy but gifted with extraordinary farming skills, leaving Rain stunned at her hidden potential. He said he planned to find a doctor for her mother in the city and invited her along, but Lillian shyly refused, fearing her lowly status would dirty a noble's carriage. Rain chuckled kindly, saying dirt could be washed, while her presence was what mattered, urging her to come. He suddenly changed the subject, asking why such a grand casino existed in this poor place, wanting its true origin. Lillian explained that when Duke Soren last attacked, the city nearly collapsed with countless soldiers dead. Soon after the war, flash floods struck, destroying crops and fertile land. Now many residents couldn't even afford a proper meal. Rain looked around at the misery, nodding at her words. He remembered his father had sent large aid funds and grew furious, suspecting the city lord had embezzled them. Rain immediately asked if Lillian knew the lord's mansion, and she confirmed she did. But before she could guide, a knight charged in at reckless speed. He shouted loudly for everyone to clear the way. He arrogantly cursed civilians as insects, saying being trampled was deserved. Leah reacted instantly, pulling Rain away from the horse's path at the last second. Her heart froze, thinking a moment's delay would have killed him. Ryan, breathless from the sudden yank, urged Leah to release him. She quickly let go and anxiously asked if he was hurt. Rain laughed, reassuring her that thanks to her he wasn't crushed into meat. He asked Lillian who that arrogant man was. Lillian said it was a young master of the Edwin family, owners of the entire casino. Rain narrowed his eyes at the clue, while Lillian sighed that they were rich but cruel. Ryan declared his father's aid had been swallowed by that family, then demanded Lillian lead him to the casino. She panicked, begging him not to go, fearing he'd be destroyed in their lair. But he only smiled firmly, claiming no one could touch him. Lillian watched his attitude, full of doubts. She wondered just how powerful this young master really was to be so fearless. Soon they stood before the luxurious casino, palace-like, making Rain mutter in disdain. The gate was strictly guarded by 2 soldiers scrutinizing every passerby. Rain thought that if villagers were to live decently, the den of vice must be destroyed. Entering inside, he was stunned by the sight of people wailing after losing everything. Others laughed arrogantly, spending money without care. Rain quietly observed the whole scene, and grew more certain the people would never prosper while the casino remained open. Leah whispered that soldiers had surrounded the place, awaiting orders. Rain stopped them, insisting patience to catch the true mastermind. At that moment, the manager appeared cheerfully, asking what game Rain wanted to play. Ryan feigned innocence, saying it was his first visit and he wanted something simple. The manager politely invited him along, reminding he must buy chips first. Staff handed Rain 2 free chips as a starter bonus. They explained it was a gift to test first-time luck. Rain smiled, taking it as a convenient chance. He bet the dice on the small number. Onlookers mocked, certain he would lose everything. But the result came up high, stunning all and disappointing low-bet players. The manager feigned sympathy, urging him to try again since he almost won. Rain calmly dismissed the game as meaningless, uninterested. He added he was hungry and planned to leave. But the manager quickly blocked him, insisting he couldn't leave without paying. Rain protested, saying he hadn't taken anything, so why pay? The manager's face changed, demanding money for the 2 chips, despite earlier saying free. He sneered that nothing here was ever truly free. Then he fabricated a price of 100 gold each plus service fees, totaling 250 gold. He threatened Rain must pay or hand over valuables, otherwise he couldn't leave. Lillian interjected angrily, exposing the lie, saying chips were worth only 1 silver coin. Her father played here daily, so she knew. The manager's face darkened in rage, ordering guards to throw Lillian out. Rain suddenly launched a direct kick at the manager. He crashed onto a table, scattering chips across the floor. Greedy gamblers lunged to snatch them, chaos erupting instantly. Rain sighed, realizing reforming them would be an immense challenge. A commanding voice rang out as a member of the Edwin family entered with retainers. He scorned the scene, warning anyone causing trouble would pay with their life. Rain smiled faintly, thinking the true prey had appeared and the act was nearly over. The Edwin heir's presence terrified the gamblers, making them retreat. The young master coldly ordered his men to punish the crowd. His soldiers obeyed at once. They brutally beat the greedy gamblers without mercy. The rest scrambled away, hiding in fear. The young master proudly declared this was a lesson for those who forgot their place. Lillian clenches her hands, filled with self-blame. She recalls Rain's efforts, realizing she has been cowardly too long and must now stand up. She steps forward, boldly declaring that her brother will not let them deceive anymore. The crowd is shocked, unable to believe anyone would oppose the Edwin family. The young master sneers and provokes her to state her intentions clearly. Lillian firmly accuses the casino of cheating, asserting that her brother far surpasses them. Varslow, Edwin's henchman, laughs mockingly and threatens to deal with her immediately. He charges to attack, while Lillian closes her eyes in acceptance. But no pain comes and she opens her eyes in shock. In front of her, Ryan is holding Varslow's hand, shielding her. He quickly evaluates him. Low loyalty, brutal skills, proof of Edwin's corruption, and decides they are a threat to be eliminated. Varslow growls, boasting he is advanced while Rain is stagnant. Ryan realizes Varslow wants to suppress his progress, but he believes both himself and the people have their own strength to rise. Varslow shows interest, asks Ryan's identity, then dismisses it as unimportant since no one dares touch him. At that moment, Rain claps his hands as a signal. His army immediately enters, overwhelming the scene. He declares that strength determines outcomes, and now he holds power here. The atmosphere shifts into a lavish banquet with nobles and merchants bringing gifts and even disguised marriage proposals. Lucas observes, finding the flattery ridiculous since Rain is just an ordinary noble. But he and Sickle already prepared a plan to bind Rain in a web of interests and limit his influence. Their goal is to keep Rain busy and away from crucial politics. And Lucas suddenly thinks of Varslow's son. If Varslow faces Rain, the result would be notable, but Lucas knows the city lord is too cunning for certainty. As the feast is lively, an announcement silences the hall. They proclaim the presence of Rain, son of the Grand Duke. The Crow clan chief respectfully offers gifts, while the Chicken clan chief boldly presents his daughter for marriage to Rain. Rain calmly accepts the gifts, maintaining formal composure. He then has a large board brought in, surprising guests as if they were in a classroom. He introduces a dam blueprint, an idea just drafted that afternoon. Then he eagerly explains details, inviting everyone to come closer for a clear view. The Crow chief understands nothing, while the Chicken clan only vaguely guesses it concerns water. Rain gently reassures them, promises to explain clearly, and requests the map to be brought. When the map is opened, he analyzes the terrain, pointing out flood dangers that ruin crops and cause suffering. Ryan explains the dam will regulate water, prevent rainy season floods, relieve dry season droughts, and support sustainable farming. Lucas starts paying attention, realizing this plan could yield immense profit, showing Rain is more calculating than he appears. The Crow clan chief questions why Rain reveals it, guessing he must need help. Rain confirms, openly stating he needs funds because building a dam is very costly, but the nobles all complain of poverty, making excuses not to contribute. Lucas secretly laughs, thinking Rain is too naive to expect these leeches to spend gold. But Rain calmly reveals he already won 50,000 gold from the casino and plans to impose heavy taxes on other gambling dens to fund the dam. Lucas grows even more attentive, seeing Rain as decisive, though not cunning, while the nobles panic over threatened interests, especially the Edwin families. Lucas silently changes his mind. Since Rain has touched his interests, he cannot be ignored. He stands to question Rain, claiming casino control violates imperial law. Other nobles echo him, collectively accusing Rain of overstepping authority. The room turns into a noisy denunciation session against him. Those who flattered him moments ago now quickly turn hostile. Lucas observes, thinking Rain is too innocent to realize they all profit from the casinos, and crossing them invites disaster. Yet Rain remains calm, pointing out that when he asked for investment, they pled poverty, but now when he has funds himself, they oppose him. He admits casinos are legal, but exposes their tax evasion as blatant robbery. Finally, Rain issues an ultimatum. Either surrender all assets and take responsibility, or shut down gambling. Otherwise, he will use force to make them obey. Lucas tries to twist the situation, mockingly invoking the Grand Duke to threaten Rain with his father's punishment, while nobles join in accusing him of abuse of power. Rain dismisses it coolly, treating their accusations like mere dust. He scolds them for hypocrisy, then orders the captured witnesses to be brought out. As soon as the prisoners are escorted in, Lucas is stunned to see they are the two guards who always shadow his son Varslo. If they were captured, it means Varslo has certainly caused major trouble. Rain turns to question Lucas if he knows these two men. Lucas pretends indifference, coldly denying any acquaintance. Rain remains unmoved, pressing that the question requires only a direct answer, yes or no. Then he recounts how the two attacked him in the city, boasting that no one dared touch them, making him suspect someone powerful behind them. And in the city, who else but Lucas? He asserts that all evidence points directly to Lucas. Then Rain turns to the hall, asking if anyone recognizes the master of these two men. The room sinks into tense silence, everyone knowing they serve Varslo, which means direct involvement. Lucas is cornered, only hoping the henchmen stay silent to avoid implicating him. Suddenly, he draws a dagger, loudly accusing the two of plotting to assassinate the young master and declaring they deserve death. With that, he kills them on the spot, blood splattering coldly. The crowd is stunned, as if watching a bloody tragedy on stage, while Lucas wears a mask of grief. He bows to apologize to Rain, excusing his rash action as emotional impulse, ready to accept punishment. Rain smirks, lavishly praising Lucas as a virtuous noble and declaring him the city's greatest aristocrat. Lucas plays along, bowing deeply in thanks. But Rain immediately flips, pointing out Lucas killed his subordinates before the true mastermind appeared, then orders the real culprit to be brought forth. Varslo is dragged out like an animal led to execution. He rages, screaming for a duel and flaunting his father's power like a cheap salesman. Lucas stands dumbfounded, connecting his son's absence all day with this twisted affair involving Rain's family. Varslo points at Rain, accusing him of killing his guards and calling it a fatal mistake. He screams threats of torturing Rain to death, sounding fierce but appearing pitiful. Rain smiles mockingly, treating the threats as a joke, even urging him to boast more. Taking the chance, Varslo arrogantly declares his family untouchable. Rain laughs, calling him the loudest mouth he's ever seen, then turns to ask Lucas for his opinion. Only then does Varslo notice his father present, mocking Rain for leaning on family ties and revealing himself as Lucas' son. Lucas furiously orders his son to kneel, publicly calling him the disgrace of his life. Varslo freezes, stammering, recalling the praise his father once gave him. Lucas coldly forces his son's head to the ground, making him apologize to grasp the danger. He bows before Rain, confessing on his son's behalf, promising never to repeat it and offering everything to save his life. Varslo, shaken, remembers his father's advice to befriend the Grand Duke's son, realizing he dug his own grave. He trembles, asking Rain if he truly is the Grand Duke's descendant. Rain mocks him, saying only a fool would think a commoner could achieve all this. Varslo realizes his mistake, banging his head and begging forgiveness, while Lucas continues lowering himself, pleading for a way out for his family. Lucas chokes up, swearing his entire bloodline will obey Rain absolutely, like dogs serving their master. Rain sneers, declaring all their amassed wealth now belongs to him, but he will spare them if they surrender it willingly. Lucas bows in thanks, relieved as if escaping a blade's edge. Yet inside he burns with hatred, determined to drag someone else down with him, targeting Edric. He accuses Edric of treason, colluding with outsiders and plotting against the Grand Duke, trying to shift blame. The nobles are shaken, the news like thunder. Could a lord be a traitor? Such a crime is unforgivable. But before he can say more, Rain interrupts, bluntly telling Lucas he dug his own grave with that vile attempt to drag others down, then orders his entire house exterminated. Edric appears, confident things are going as planned, thinking Rain is still just an impulsive boy. He steps forward, playing the loyal subject, bowing in thanks and showing devotion to the Grand Duke. Rain responds with apparent trust, saying if he doubted, he would have planted spies already. But inwardly, Rain confirms the opposite, noting Edric's loyalty rating is extremely low, just as Lucas warned. The scene shifts to the study, where Rain sits deeply absorbed in thought. He discovers the casino earned in one night as much as 2 years of taxes, while Esling contributed nothing, siphoning the Grand Duke's funds into gambling. At that moment, Leah enters carrying a tray of black tea. She gently advises Rain to rest after working for hours. Rain remains focused on the records, pointing out the nobility here is rotten to the core. Leah hesitantly warns that the accusation against Edric might be true, and if he rebels while Rain is still in Esling, it would be disastrous, so he should inform the Grand Duke. Rain calmly soothes her, saying he understands her concern, but he admits Edric is indeed a traitor. Yet he has devised a cunning plan to bind him before he can act. Leah, distressed, timidly asks what exactly he intends to do. Rain explains slowly, he cannot move yet because not all of Edric's allies have been exposed. He worries acting too soon would plunge the city into chaos, but is reassured since Edric still sees him as a fool, allowing the plan to proceed in secret. The next morning, at the City Lord's mansion, Eldrick receives Guildmaster Malcolm, accusing Rain of deliberately insulting the Mage Guild. He cites a clause in the dam project excluding mages, using it to stir trouble. Hearing this, Malcolm flushes with anger, shouting that it is a public affront. He growls that the Mage Guild is the nation's backbone and cannot be cast aside like trash. Edric gleefully watches, glad he can pit the Mage Guild against Rain without spending a coin. Malcolm furiously decides to confront Rain at once, while Eldrick revels in the thought that Rain is now fully isolated. Meanwhile, Rain is engrossed in construction blueprints, his head full of numbers. Leah enters to report that Malcolm wishes to meet him. Rain is slightly surprised, wondering who would come at this time. As soon as they meet, Malcolm points straight at him, accusing Rain of insulting the Mage Guild upon arrival. Rain pauses briefly but calmly replies he never intended conflict, since the guild serves the people and he would not oppose them. Malcolm immediately produces a document as proof, pointing to a clause banning mages from the dam project, accusing Rain of feigned ignorance. Rain nods, confirming he wrote the document, but insists it was only to choose suitable workers, not as an insult. Malcolm grows more furious, claiming the letter excluded both mages and the elderly, treating them as useless. Rain stays silent, cursing inside. Is he blind? It clearly bans entry only to dangerous zones. Whoever asked mages to haul rocks? Malcolm sternly warns that if Rain insists, the Mage Guild will become his enemy. Rain finds the threat amusing, intending to test the man's loyalty. He activates a scan skill, seeing Malcolm's loyalty at 82. A firm level, so someone else must be pulling the strings. Rain chooses to soothe, explaining that decision rests on 3 valid reasons. First, mages cannot work continuously, while construction requires fast progress. Second, hiring them is too costly, less efficient than hiring commoners. Third, mages already live in comfort while commoners lack work. Hiring the poor fulfills a ruler's duty. Malcolm still refuses, insisting true power lies in magic and excluding them is a mistake. Rain only shakes his head, reminding him this land is under his authority. He affirms he will treat all classes fairly, forbidding mages from placing themselves above the people. Malcolm's face darkens as he threatens that offending the Mage Guild will bring Rain terrible consequences. Rain remains calm, saying respect is the only reason Malcolm still stands after such words. With just a look, a maid presses a dagger to Malcolm's throat, making him tremble and beg forgiveness for his rashness. Rain notices Malcolm's loyalty unchanged, concluding Edric incited him rather than personal motive. He signals the maid to withdraw the blade. Rain orders Malcolm released, assuring him he is not an enemy. Malcolm bows gratefully. The system announces, Rain has completed the scanning task, unlocking a new challenge, to recruit 5 influential figures. He smiles with satisfaction, eager to check the reward. Outside the hall, Edric waits for Malcolm. Seeing him emerge, he immediately asks if Rain was willing to listen. Malcolm replies wearily that Rain is stubborn, almost driving him out, and he no longer wants involvement. But Edric only sneered, whispering a plan that would force Rain to respect Malcolm. Malcolm hesitated but grew curious, asking for details. Edric promised a more effective plan if he simply obeyed. Malcolm doubted, pointing out that Rain's project gave jobs to the poor, which was hard to sabotage. Edric stressed the key was making them unable to work, suggesting Malcolm use magic to exhaust commoners so Rain would fire them in anger. Malcolm was deeply shocked by such a cruel proposal. He strongly opposed, saying he would not harm innocents nor curse ordinary people. But Edric coldly mocked the poor as lazy, deserving misery, only begging nobles for aid. He threatened that if the poor proved capable, magicians would be pushed aside and the guild's prestige would collapse. Torn between conscience and duty to the guild, Malcolm finally nodded, asking Edric what exactly to do. At the center, a huge board drew crowds by announcing recruitment with work terms and benefits that seemed like a dream. Many doubted, recalling past times nobles tricked villagers, leading everyone to conclude it was surely a hidden scheme. Lillian could not hold back, standing up to defend Rain, affirming his sincerity and ideals to change the city for its people. Yet the crowd only mocked, saying she was naive and easily swayed by Noble's fine words. Ignoring public opinion, Lillian stepped to the project's registration desk. She firmly declared she wanted to apply on behalf of her father, hoping he could join the dam construction. The recruiter accepted her father's file but refused hers. She protested fiercely, claiming she was as capable as any man and refused to be belittled for being a girl. The staff explained clearly it was Rain's direct order. Underage workers would not be hired, with heavy penalties for violations. He detailed the rules. 8-hour shifts, 3 simple meals, 10 coins per day paid immediately after work. Lillian encouraged her father to focus on working hard and not rely on others, stressing this was an important project led by Rain. Her father vowed to abandon idle habits and labor diligently to be worthy of the trust the Lord placed in commoners. He told his daughter to stay home to care for her sick mother, along with the family uncle. His words caught the registrar's attention, who asked about his wife's illness. Lillian's father confirmed she was gravely ill, but emphasized he only sought work, not pity. The soldier smiled, explaining he asked not for the job, but to offer help. He announced that the young master had prepared housing for workers and their families, so they could both work and care for loved ones. Even the sick could move in. Hearing this, Lillian's father burst into tears, kneeling in gratitude that Rain's kindness lifted his family's burden. The soldier quickly helped him up, promising to send people to move belongings and care for them, as it was the young master's direct order. Witnessing such concern, the crowd began to change their view, admitting Rain was truly a compassionate lord. Many immediately decided to join, making the scene lively. The soldier assured everyone would be registered properly. At that moment, the system in Rain's mind reported that the lithium battery design had been provided. This was marked as the first successful mission. Rain frowned in doubt, thinking batteries were useless without a generator, even suspecting the system was mocking him. He opened the next mission and saw its difficulty was much higher, to recruit 5 highly influential figures. Rain pondered, unsure where to find people of such caliber. He had once planned to train Leah, but upon checking, realized her stats were already extremely high, near the limit. Thus, training Leah was redundant, and since he himself did not count, he decided to leave the city to seek new talent. At that moment, Leah entered to report that Lillian had come to see him, and Rain immediately let her in. Upon meeting, Lillian urgently reported that the workers at the site could not manage the labor. Rain frowned, wanting to hear more details about this strange situation. The story then shifted to that morning at the construction site. Lillian questioned her father and the workers for resting too much, but he admitted his body suddenly felt drained and powerless. Not only him, all workers were abnormally weakened, their limbs powerless despite their will. Lillian scolded them not to waste such a rare chance. Another worker spoke up, insisting none were lazy but that some anomaly was truly exhausting them. Many guessed it was just their bodies unaccustomed to labor, that rest and food would restore them. But no one was sure. Lillian dismissed this, accusing them of making excuses, and Rain decided to check the site himself. When Rain arrived, Lillian quickly warned that the workers were making up excuses to shirk work. She cautioned that if Rain gave in, the project would never be completed. Instead of blaming, Rain examined Lillian's father and discovered he was under a curse that drained his body. He immediately realized all the workers suffered the same condition, not a natural illness. Rain gently told Lillian that they had not been lying. He resolved to uncover the source of this phenomenon. Rain was forced to activate the skill probe, which he had intended to reserve for the actual construction phase. The skill allowed him to read geological structures, resources, and all hidden factors within the ground. He ordered the system to scan the area within a 10-kilometer radius. Layers of soil and rock appeared before Rain through the analysis map. The data showed no metals or water sources, but instead a mysterious energy flow from very shallow depth. Rain warned everyone to take this place seriously, while Lillian's father suggested they could dig the thin layer of soil immediately. Sure enough, after a few strikes, a radiant crystal was unearthed, astonishing him as he had never seen such a thing. Leah was also stunned, suspecting Rain might actually be a magical prodigy for detecting something even she could not sense. Rain instructed that the crystal be carefully stored as it might reveal many hidden truths. He then shifted to ask how to break the curse. Someone replied that usually it required a priest or a mage with special power. Rain pondered, mentioning the mage guild but concluding it was not possible to seek them now. He decided to take Lillian's father to a priest, while the girl still doubted her father was truly cursed. Rain confirmed the curse was real, also hinting he had guessed the mastermind and that the culprit would pay. When the group reached the cathedral, a friendly priest came out to greet them. This person smiled and welcomed Rain with great respect. Rain remained cautious, wanting to test the priest's loyalty before allowing treatment. The system revealed this priest was actually the Saintess Era, an elf over 2 centuries old yet utterly loyal to Rain. This discovery left Rain both surprised and intrigued, as if watching an unexpected movie twist. Era solemnly introduced herself as a saintess, like a professional host on stage. Rain pointed to Lillian's father and requested she cure the curse, carefully observing her skill. Era agreed at once, speaking with certainty. She began examining the patient's whole body. Her method relied on ice magic for detection. Soon, Era confirmed Rain's diagnosis. He was indeed cursed. Rain immediately asked if she could dispel it. Era calmly summoned holy light, affirming her duty was to lead those shrouded in darkness back to the light. A glowing orb appeared in her hand, shining brightly. It flew straight into Lillian's father's body, dissolving the spell completely. Freed, he joyfully thanked Rain, vowing to work harder and more devotedly than ever, as if reborn. Rain told him not to rush. First the curse issue must be settled, then produced the crystal to ask Era about its nature and effects. He handed her the stone as though a teacher distributing material to a student. Era quickly identified it as a dark crystal, often used as a magical tool. She explained the stone had been charged with immense energy, enough to kill, but its creator only used it to drain vitality rather than to kill. Rain then asked if crafting such an object was difficult. Era replied that for a high-level mage it was extremely easy, and guessed a powerful foe deliberately buried it under the site to hinder construction. Rain grew suspicious, asking Era whether she was involved or knew anything about his project. Era hurriedly reassured him, affirming the church always sided with the people, watched the project because it benefited the populace, and promised to stand with Rain. At that moment, Rain recalled his encounter with Malcolm, the arrogant old man unafraid, and silently resolved to teach him a proper lesson next time. Back to Era, Rain emphasized that the entire area was cursed and asked if she could lift it all at once. Era explained that dispelling a curse from one person was very different from cleansing a whole region. Even if successful, it could easily be reapplied, so the method was unsustainable. Rain agreed with her reasoning, saying the root cause must be found rather than treating symptoms, and decided to confront the mastermind directly. Era suggested there was someone capable of handling the root problem, but that person was eccentric and hard to rely on, advising Rain not to expect too much. Rain approached a large mansion. Nearing it, he remembered Saint Isira had once given him the address of Selena, the former leader of the Mage Guild. He had heard she was a master of magic and hoped to rely on her to overcome this crisis. Walking beside him, Leah suddenly noticed strange signs from the mansion's roof. She urgently urged Rain to dodge, predicting an imminent explosion. Soon after, a violent blast erupted from the second floor. Rain was stunned, unable to understand why the former guild leader's house had such an incident. Inside the mansion, Selena calmly muttered, lamenting another failed experiment but vowing to pursue it to the end. Rain and Leah slowly approached. She immediately showed unwillingness to help them. She said she was too absorbed in her research and would not leave until it was finished. Interested, Rain asked if she was crafting a magic staff. Selena burst out laughing, saying his thought was too simple. She explained she was developing magical instruments, not ordinary staves. Leah interjected, reminding Selena that the man before her was the Grand Duke's son, demanding she speak respectfully. Feeling Leah's energy, Selena grew curious rather than annoyed. She suggested Leah assist her research. In return, she would support Rain, calling it a mutual benefit. But Leah firmly refused, declaring they only came to seek aid and warning her not to disrespect her master. Selena remained calm, replying with provocation, saying it had been long since anyone dared speak to her like that. Before things escalated, Rain intervened, reminding them their goal was help, not conflict. Observing the messy documents, Rain realized Selena seemed focused on research rather than administrative duties. She nodded in admission, saying all of it was the result of failures. She explained she was trying to create a device to store magical energy, allowing mages to use power efficiently instead of wasting it. Rain reflected on the immense impact if such an invention became reality. He proposed a deal. He would only support Selena if she in return helped him when needed. Selena frowned skeptically, saying repeated failures had left her impatient and doubtful anyone could grasp her idea immediately. Rain remained resolute, repeating his offer. He asked if, upon successfully creating a magic storage device, she would side with him against the Mage Guild. Rain asserted the guild was causing chaos, and only Selena had the authority to suppress it. Once the tool was complete, even Malcolm would yield. The curse would vanish, and the guild would fall under control. Selena warned that if it failed, the consequences would be disastrous. She stressed that in such a case, self-restraint would be extremely difficult. After 5 hours, the process of completing the lithium batteries was mentioned. Rain reviewed the blueprint, realizing the issue was not just batteries, but also a power source such as a dam, a project far beyond the available time. Selena unexpectedly proposed a solution, using mages themselves as the energy supply. When inspecting the product, Rain confirmed it was perfectly precise. But Selena grew angry, calling it absurd. She had tested countless expensive materials before and they all exploded, so she could not believe a few stones could hold magical power. Rain reassured her, explaining the battery had an energy density of 185 watt Kyugu. She should channel her full magic into it, and the battery would store it through conductive wiring without risk of explosion. Selena recalled rumors about controlling electricity and wondered if they were true. When she tried channeling magic through the wires, she was astonished that the battery absorbed the energy steadily instead of exploding. Stunned, she exclaimed that this was beyond belief. Success had arrived, but Rain reminded her the amount of magic was still insufficient, not even charging half a cell, proving her power alone was not enough. Offended, Selena swore she would exhaust all her strength to prove herself. Soon after, she collapsed from exhaustion. In disbelief, she admitted the device could indeed contain all her energy, surpassing every expectation. Rain conducts a battery status check. The result shows it reached 87% capacity, enough to power an electric car for about 3,000 calories. He admits Selena is truly powerful, as releasing that much energy is a rare feat. With the battery nearly full, Rain declares it's time to prove the potential of magical technology. He performs wire connections to generate electricity. Selena, horrified, asks if he can control electric magic. Rain replies that not only he, but the townsfolk can also harness this resource. Selena laughs mockingly, saying magic is extremely hard to learn and cannot be made available to everyone. Rain sternly insists he is not joking and has even bigger ideas for magical tools. He describes a vision where everyone can use fire, wind, and other spells through devices, urging Selena to cooperate to make it real. Selena begins to ponder, imagining a world where not everyone needs innate magical talent. The story shifts to Malakine, who sits alone in silence. He believes Rain will eventually come to him and acknowledge the value of wizards, learning not to despise them. But that belief is shattered when Selena suddenly appears, smiling coldly and remarking how long it has been since they met. Malakine, nervous, stammers while addressing Selena by her former title and asking why she appeared. But Selena questions why she once entrusted the guild's authority to him. She reproaches him for crossing the line, even opposing the Duke's heir. She warns rebellion against that family has only one outcome, making Malakine uneasy and hastily professing loyalty to the nation and family. Selena, doubtful, repeats his words as if probing, then demands a full confession. She accuses him of casting a curse at the construction site to sabotage Rain, pointing out the recklessness of denying it. Malakine trembles and weeps. He begs to justify himself, saying resentment grew because he was excluded from all affairs. He gathered followers, spreading the idea that the Lord looked down on them, which fueled discontent. In anger, he created a teleportation crystal and hid it under the construction site to mask his actions. He explains that commoners exhausted themselves by working too fast, making Rain think they were lazy. He hoped the young master would realize the mistake, apologize, and cooperate. He insists his actions were only to preserve the wizard's profession, not let commoners take over. Selena grows furious, calls him foolish, and warns he has been manipulated into becoming a traitor. Malakine panics and asks who the one behind manipulating him is. But Selena brushes it aside, saying that will be dealt with later, and orders him to rally the wizards back to prevent disaster. He quickly agrees. She then turns to Rain, saying the matter is settled, the Wizard Guild will no longer cause trouble, and reveals they were merely misled by City Lord Ayerderwiki. Rain sighs in relief, sincerely thanking Selena for her help. Selena suggests discreetly eliminating Ayerderwiki so thoroughly that no trace remains, as if he vanished. But Rain immediately rejects it, saying Ayerderwiki is not a concern. He plans to use him as bait to track the mastermind, comparing it to catching a big fish by using a small one. As he leaves, Rain only remarks that piles of work are still waiting. Selena smiles, holds him back, reminding him they are about to start a new project and hopes he reports often. She is eager to cooperate. Rain replies that he will always remember her kindness and advises Selena to focus on rallying her people and encouraging their readiness. She agrees and promises to do so personally. Meanwhile, Ayerderwiki panics, lamenting that the plan collapsed because of a meddling boy. Even Malakine was dragged along. He anxiously asks what to do next. A cold figure in a cloak says there is no need to rush. He believes the real threat is only Selena, and if she is eliminated, the Wizard Guild will collapse. Then he shifts to asking about the project's progress. The City Lord replies that the construction is going smoothly. Esling City will soon grow wealthy, and prosperity will make their scheme harder to succeed. He stresses that only when the poor fall into destitution can the plan work, then boasts of manipulating the nobles, forcing them to raise grain prices sky-high to plunge the people into misery. The cloaked man looks doubtful, questioning whether the nobles would accept such a dangerous game. The City Lord is confident, saying Rain cut off their profits from the casino, leaving them desperate. Now he offers them a new way to get rich, and no one refuses their own benefit. Their wolfish nature only needs the right bait to surface. He counts coins while laughing, declaring that soon grain prices will soar, forcing Rain to build dams, after which all other profits will be drained. He proclaims both the project and the young master's grand ambitions will end in nothingness. A merchant shoves Lilian aside, hurling insults that the poor have no place to squeeze in, and without money they should forget about buying rice. Lilian protests fiercely, accusing them of outrageous price gouging when rice costs skyrocketed many times over in just one day. The smug trader declares the grain belongs to him. He can sell it at any price he wants, and those without money should get lost. Lilian chokes with anger, recalling her promise to Rin about fair prices, but now their trading plan risks collapse. She furiously denounces the merchants as greedy villains, using petty tricks to oppose Rain's just deeds. He retorts, calling himself merely a skilled trader who breaks no laws, while Rain is powerless to change anything. Then he violently kicks Lilian down, threatening to drive her away immediately. The townsfolk watching feel mounting dread, as soaring rice prices make their already harsh lives even more hopeless. The scene shifts to the cathedral. Saintess Yila laments humanity's growing corruption that has led to such tragedy. In just 3 days, rice jumped from its former cheap price to an unimaginable level beyond affordability. She admits their food reserves are too small to save the people from famine and cold in winter. Yila hands a money pouch to Iorphalia, instructing her to save the people at all costs, even if it means bribing the guards. Iorphalia worries that the silver is too much, and after bribery there will be little left. Ysaila interrupts, forcing her to follow the order exactly. But when she reaches out to store it, the gold suddenly vanishes without a trace. She quickly turns to look for the cause, and right before her eyes someone appears. It is Liat, along with Rain, who just arrived. Rain firmly proposes that Ysaila forget about the guards, as cooperating directly with him would yield far greater benefits. Ysaila stares intently, probing the true intent of young Master Rain. Rain answers with a confident smile, assuring her that his words will give her peace of mind. She frowns, reminding him this is the human capital where no elves are present. Rain returns the money to Iorphalia, openly acknowledging Ysaila's elf identity and asserting he bears no malice, wishing for cooperation so both sides can live in harmony. Ysaila replies that if sincere, that is good news. Rain states clearly that the main topic is control over the grain distribution center. Ysaila claims Rain is delusional since food issues lie far beyond his control. Rain bows slightly, asking them to explain in more detail. Ysaila explains that in Esling, 4 noble families have monopolized grain for over 100 years, completely manipulating prices. She recalls the incident of Rain destroying the Edwin family, which made powers wary but also more determined to oppose him. Rain counters by asking how deep Ysaila's knowledge of this city is. She confirms she has lived there 120 years, witnessed many generations, and knows every corner. And since Rain struck at Edwin, the chance for negotiation has ended. She sighs that war and disasters have drained resources, and soaring rice prices will drive commoners into mass starvation, leaving her helpless and in pain. Rain reassures her, asserting his strength and promising to stabilize the market within half a month, even lowering prices to unprecedented levels. The scene shifts to the Klein mansion. Augusite declares that with the city lord's backing, the 4 noble families have reaped enormous profits. The allies all cheer in unison, praising Augusite's great achievements. Augusite raises his glass, rallying everyone to celebrate their booming trade. The banquet grows lively with laughter and chatter. Suddenly, a servant rushes in with news that Rain has sent invitations to all lords, summoning them to a feast. A noble frowns, suspicious of Rain's intent in hosting a banquet. Another guesses he may be targeting them after dealing with Edwin. A third worries that since Rain crushed a powerful family, if he turns to them, the consequences would be dire. Augusite sneers, insisting the city lord backs them, allowing them to raise prices freely without fear, since their actions are perfectly legal and Rain has no excuse to interfere. Augusite stresses that as long as they avoid provoking Rain, they won't suffer Edwin's fate, because price setting belongs to merchants, and even the emperor cannot meddle. The crowd agrees, clapping in support, affirming that unity is their unstoppable strength. A merchant eagerly points out a big chance to amass wealth, announcing grain prices are locked at 3 gold coins per sack. He adds confidently that if Rain intervenes, they can just lower it slightly and still profit, so there's nothing to fear. The other nobles pledge absolute loyalty, assuring Augusite that they remain steadfast. They all agree that unity brings benefits, while division only brings harm. The scene shifts back to Rain's mansion, where he relaxes as Leah massages and tends to him. As he dozes, he is informed that 3 lords have arrived. He immediately orders them to be brought in and prepares a small banquet to welcome them. The lords enter and bow respectfully. Rain notices they are dressed in ragged clothes, pretending to be poor. He finds the act ridiculous. He bluntly criticizes them, saying if the wealthy control the city's grain, why disguise themselves as commoners? Augusite politely pretends to praise the new policy and asks how to contribute, while another interrupts, boasting he has begun selling grain cheaply to the people. Leah almost bursts out laughing, clearly seeing they fake kindness to hide price gouging and mislead Rain, but she silently mocks their foolishness. Rain politely thanks them with sarcastic words, calling their hypocrisy holy virtue. Then he directly shifts the topic of discussion elsewhere. He states that the purpose of today's meeting is to discuss grain prices. Augusite instantly acts worried, feigning sympathy while lamenting his hardships. He complains about selling at a loss, even starving at home to save the commoners, while another adds false claims that his children must go hungry so the people can eat. Rain suddenly declares he does not intend to lower prices, but instead proposes doubling them, from 1 to 4 gold coins per sack, both inflating profits and feeding noble children well. Hearing this, Augusite's greed is stirred, and he quickly asks if Rain truly means to raise the price. Rain firmly confirms, explaining that nobles must support each other. He only needs them to raise prices and give him 30% of the profits. The rest is theirs to use. Augusite turns pale, stammering to confirm the deal about raising prices and paying the percentage. Rain bluntly asserts he will directly take his cut from the grain trade. Augusite is stunned, realizing he underestimated Rain, who is as shrewd in calculation as any seasoned merchant. He smirks, admitting he misjudged, and had they allied earlier, they would already be far richer. He regrets the missed opportunity and realizes the city lord's disdain for Rain was merely jealousy. Before, they hesitated to raise prices, but with the Duke's son backing them, they no longer fear. The poor may starve, but money will pour into their pockets like a stream. Augusite turns to flatter Rain, expressing gratitude and asking when it can be officially announced so arrangements can be made. Rain says all paperwork is ready, only waiting for the Duke's seal, after which it will start immediately. He promises to push it quickly, reminding them to be sensible since he acted for their benefit, and recounts how the Edwin family brought ruin on themselves by being disrespectful, while he only wanted a share of the casino profits. The nobles nod repeatedly, praising Rain as wise, believing their descendants will live in glory while they themselves will remain wealthy, benevolent nobles. Meanwhile, in another mansion, a noble voices doubt, questioning Augusite whether Rain is truly sincere, advising caution. Others share unease, suspecting Rain's push for higher prices may just be a test. Augusite, enraged, growls and smashes a wineglass. He shouts, asserting Rain only cares for profit, not commoners' fate, stressing this is a golden opportunity to plunder wealth. He accuses the city lord of hiding it from them to block Rain's influence, making them fail to realize Rain values money above all. He orders absolute secrecy, for once they monopolize grain, they will hold the power of life and death. Hearing promises of vast treasure, the nobles quickly pledge loyalty. They unite in proclaiming Augusite as their leader, ready to follow all his commands. Seeing this, Augusite feels triumphant, believing they have finally been enlightened. He orders all grain from small merchants to be seized and stored, so once monopoly is secured, they can set any price they wish. He proclaims profits will soar beyond imagination, surpassing anything they ever dreamed of. At that moment, Era appeared at Rain's mansion, furious, accusing him of breaking promises and deceiving, lamenting the people's suffering from his actions. She sadly exclaimed that nobles only protect each other, and she had placed her trust wrongly. Lillian intervened to calm things, urging Era to hear Rain's explanation, guessing it was part of a plan, but Era bitterly dismissed it, accusing him of colluding with merchants. Even so, Lillian firmly defended him, convinced Rain had an extraordinary unseen strategy. Isera took a deep breath, trying to suppress emotions to stay calm. She turned to face Rain, directly asking if he truly intended to raise grain prices, and if so, why. Rain gently reassured, admitting the price hike was temporary. Within 15 days, he promised to collapse the whole market. Era remained doubtful, citing centuries of experience proving prices only rise once lifted, warning his plan could push people into disaster instead of saving them. Rain grew serious, asking if forcing them to lower prices by strength would help, and even if prices dropped, who would really benefit? Hearing this, Era still worried, saying Rain's game had already pushed grain to 9 coins, making poor families unable to survive and children certain to starve. She judged Rain's strategy clever yet disastrous, warning he gambled with common lives. Rain angrily countered that the poor die regardless of prices. Rain pressed Era, asking if raising prices was any different from hastening the tragedy for the poor. Era failed to grasp his logic, saying Rain's words sounded noble, but his actions were tyrannical. Rain admitted the cruelty, but claimed the real target was the nobles manipulating the market, promising the true aim would soon be clear. A week later at Selena's house, Rain explained lithium battery principles and how current flows in circuits. Selena widened her eyes in praise, hailing him as a genius turning complexity into simplicity. The lesson was interrupted when Leah entered, reporting Era sought Rain again. Rain fell silent in thought, while Selena guessed it was about the rice shortage, which had escalated to the point even nobles struggled. Soon after, Era arrived furious, reproaching Rain for breaking his promise to lower prices and accusing him of ignoring the people's suffering. Rain then inquired how many days the rice price surge had lasted. Hearing it was the 7th day, he immediately declared he would punish the merchants causing the crisis. Era, disappointed, pressed him to state clearly what actions he would take, as the people's trust, especially among the elves, was fading. Rain admitted he kept secrets because he once suspected Era of colluding with nobles, but now trusted her enough to reveal them. He pointed out a detail few noticed. The number of rice sellers had sharply dropped, leaving only 4 great families as suppliers. Era asked what that meant. Rain explained that scarcity drove prices up, and this news would lure outside merchants into the city to chase profits. Era gradually understood Rain's true plan. Rain explained that when outside merchants flooded in, they would compete to sell, driving prices down. To accelerate this process, he deliberately kept the rice price high at 4 coins. So the tempting news would spread outside, drawing merchants to bring in rice. But once they arrived, they would realize the bait wasn't as sweet as imagined. At that moment, Rain assigned Era a crucial role. She must announce throughout the city that she had lost faith in Rain, then the church would release its reserve rice at dirt-cheap prices, forcing merchants to slash theirs further. This shock would panic traders, making them dump stock to survive. Era hesitated, asking why Rain didn't do it himself. Rain replied he had no grain while the church had plenty, but Saintess immediately rejected, saying that rice was meant for winter relief. She accused Rain of making the people suffer and even wanting to steal their hope of survival. Selena mocked the Saintess, saying if she refused, Rain would still find another way, and once prices dropped, she would be blamed. Era insisted the church only wished to feed the people, not calculate profit. Rain reassured that once merchants swarmed in and prices collapsed, the church could buy new rice at half the current price. In the end, Era reluctantly agreed, and the plan was launched, sparking an unforeseen financial upheaval in the whole city. Rain confidently said merchants came not just out of greed, but dreaming of quick wealth to retire for life. But when they found sales difficult, they would rush to dump stock, even consider hauling it back. However, the blockade order cut off retreat, and knowing hesitation meant loss, merchants would never accept going empty-handed. The scene shifted to the Augustus mansion. A panicked lord reported that the church was selling rice at 1 coin while the market price was 10, drawing massive crowds. Another noble interjected, asking Augustus how to respond. All the lords grew tense, faces furrowed. Only Augustus remained calm, unmoved. He scoffed that the church lacked enough rice for the whole city and would soon run out, so instead of fearing, they should raid the stockpile. The scene cut to the church, where people swarmed to buy rice, each trying to grab 5 sacks for safety, creating extreme chaos. Era shouted to calm the crowd, revealing that 100,000 sacks of rice had arrived from the capital, so no one needed to fear shortages. The crowd cheered, praising the Pope for kindness and care for the people, but cries urging quick buying rose, forcing Era to yell at them to line up or worsen the chaos. At that moment, order troops marched in, scolding people to keep discipline, reminding them this was a church, not a marketplace. Another soldier added that the Pope would keep sending food, assuring the city's people they would escape hardship from now on. Era smiled outwardly, but inside felt uneasy. worried that Rain's plan had made her borrow the Pope's prestige, fearing discovery would be hard to explain. Meanwhile, merchants began grumbling in discontent, as all profit hopes were shattered by the church. One man lamented losses, citing transport and capital costs with no gain, hurriedly planning a fire sale to avoid heavier loss. He shouted loudly, dropping his price to 95 silver coins, boasting no one had a better deal. Immediately, the people rushed, scrambling to buy his rice. Other traders panicked, realizing they had fallen into a trap, and discussed selling quickly or facing even worse losses. One dropped the price to 90, another slashed to 85, sparking a chaotic dumping race. At Rain's mansion, Leah excitedly praised how within minutes prices had collapsed, with some willing to sell at 70. Rain calmly said it was just human instinct. Fear of loss. He analyzed that once they heard the church had surplus, merchants lost composure and fled their failing gamble. Leah believed at this pace the market would soon stabilize, praising Rain's brilliance, but he warned not to underestimate merchants. He explained that once Augustus and his faction joined in, prices would plummet to unprecedented levels, creating a historic shock. And in the end, it would be the poor who benefited, since distant merchants could not stay long in the city. Augustus and his allies had long roots in the region and imported rice at 2 gold coins, so they would never accept selling at a loss. Moreover, the 4 great families were tightly allied, and thinking they could be divided was just an illusion. Rain countered that their unity had indeed brought them huge profits. But now, with looming losses, that bond would break since interests always outweighed loyalty. Having done his part, Ryan left the merchants to struggle, convinced rice prices had dropped enough for people to be fed, then turned to discuss matters with the messengers. At the same time, Augustus was hastily approached by a nervous noble with urgent news. He worried that rice had fallen to 75 a sack and feared the situation would sink further, begging Augustus for guidance. Another dismissed the concern, saying most stock was still in their hands, while small traders sold little, so sooner or later people would return to buy from nobles. A blonde noble interrupted, insisting the news he brought was true and not fabricated. Augustus reflected, realizing their initial price hike had sparked the chaos, then the wave of merchants drove prices further down. He concluded the entire upheaval was Rain's move. He was stunned by such ruthlessness, suspecting Rain aimed to wipe out the noble families with devil-like schemes. Ronald curiously asked what Augustus had discovered that others hadn't. Augustus explained that at first they both lowered the gold price to 2 and raised the official price so no one suspected. But Rain exploited the church's reputation to control the whole market. With the price crash shock, Rain made merchants fear losses, forcing them into fire sales, driving prices to the bottom, as low as 75 coins a sack in some places. Ronald was stunned, never expecting Rain to be so cold and calculating. Augustus reassured allies, declaring he also had a plan to reverse the game, challenging that he would crush Rhine's scheme. The nobles eagerly demanded the method, ready to follow Augustus' command. Augustus revealed the rumor of the granary near the church was false, and outside merchants would soon withdraw. They would only survive if united, for one early seller would collapse the whole block. Augustus stressed no one must sell early, waiting for the right time to act. His words strung the nobles as tense as snapping strings. Ronald feigned agreement, declaring he would hurry home to order his house to stop selling until commanded. But once leaving, he secretly plotted to sell first to avoid total loss. Other nobles suspected Ronald was pretending, certain he slipped away to sell secretly. So each quietly withdrew, harboring private schemes. At that moment, the butler timidly asked Augustus whether they should halt sales. Augustus burst in anger, kicking over a wine bottle and scolding the butler as foolish. He reasoned that Ronald and the others were untrustworthy and surely already selling secretly. If he held stock, only he would be trapped, so he ordered an immediate sell-off. The butler hurried to comply. Elsewhere, the Saintess stood beside Rain, reassured by him that the crisis was resolved and rice supplies were enough to feed the people through winter. She was surprised, asking why suddenly so much surplus existed. Rain explained that thanks to the initial high prices, they had gathered huge capital, quickly reinvested, doubling supplies and gaining absolute advantage. Lillian interjected that rice prices had collapsed. Now 1 gold coin could buy 3 sacks instead of 1, unable to hide her admiration. Rain affirmed he had foreseen it. With patience at the right time, prices would crash, creating a chance to buy cheaply and fully solve the famine. Then he quickly shifted the conversation to another topic. Saint Isera asked about the next plan, especially concerning the elf race. Rain replied that they needed a more detailed discussion about future cooperation between both sides. The saintess asked curiously, wanting to hear more specifics. Rain explained they would provide not only food but also full support from clothing to housing in exchange for the elves' commitment to work for them. The saintess hesitated, saying she lacked authority and that only the elf queen could decide, but promised to report Rain's goodwill fully. She pledged to write immediately to the queen, hoping to arrange an official meeting soon. Rain realized the plan had gone far beyond expectations, with the opposing nobles heavily defeated and unable to react. The Mage Guild was under his control. Next would be the church with the saintess, then expanding influence over the elves and citizens. The only obstacle was Eldrick, who controlled the military and finances. Rhine resolved to seize the army to eliminate the risk of rebellion. While deep in thought, he was unexpectedly comforted by Leo approaching. She reassured him that he had already achieved great results and need not pressure himself further. Rain exhaled softly, allowing himself a short rest. Elsewhere in the city, a weary merchant complained of soldiers stripping him of all capital. He sighed, lamenting that profiting here was futile, his faith in Eldrick shaken. He muttered sadly, no longer sure about the fairness he once believed in. Rain approached, gently asking the cause of his misery. The merchant bluntly responded, questioning Rain's identity. Rain smiled cryptically, suggesting they cooperate in business. Soon after, the two appeared together at the city gate. The guards stopped them, checking their origin and goods. Lillian calmly answered, claiming to be a trader wanting to sell wares in Esling. The soldiers confirmed her merchant status, but required inspection before entry. The guard group began their search. One carelessly dropped and broke a container. Lillian immediately protested harshly, worried damaged goods would be unsellable. After inspection, the soldiers reported no suspicious findings. The commander sneered, declaring a gate toll must be paid. Lillian grew angry, furious that her goods were damaged, yet extra payment was still demanded. The guard ignored her, insisting tax law spared no one. Before she could argue further, Rain intervened, telling her to yield to avoid wasting time. Lillian reluctantly handed over the money. One guard mocked, demanding even more silver before allowing passage. Lillian snapped, pointing out the demand exceeded the value of her goods, but the soldier bluntly pressured her to pay or turn back. Lillian gritted her teeth, convinced the greedy soldiers dared exploit Rain's name to plunder and would pay sooner or later. After reluctantly paying the fee, the group was allowed to pass. Rain turned to a nearby merchant and spoke mockingly. He pretended to accuse Rain of greed, pushing the people into heavy taxation. The man replied with a cold stare, stressing he would not tolerate insults toward the noble who contributed to Esling. Rain kept provoking, claiming it was his direct order to tax, not the soldier's fault. The merchant sighed, saying the speaker must be new and unaware of Rain's true value. He recounted that Rain once lowered food prices to save the poor from famine, so a little personal loss was worth it. The man declared that if he met Rain, he would urge him to continue his path, as the people fully supported him. Rain frowned, mentioning a family extermination rumored to be mad land seizure. The merchant laughed bitterly, explaining it was the Edwin clan who ran gambling and deserved destruction, surprising Rain with his knowledge. The merchant affirmed his information was absolutely reliable. He revealed Edwin's wealth came not from gambling, but from human trafficking. Rain's face darkened upon hearing of this crime. He told himself that even with manpower shortages, eradicating them was still the right choice. But what worried him most was the army's loyalty, since losing control would endanger both inside and outside the country. Suddenly, noise outside made everyone turn. Lillian shouted that they had already paid taxes and could not be charged again. A soldier mocked, saying the last was a city fee, now it was a border tax. Lillian fiercely objected, calling it blatant robbery. The soldier sneered, ordering them to pay or turn back, unwilling to hear her complaints. Lillian crossed her arms defiantly and demanded to know the sum. He calmly replied, demanding 1 gold coin. Lillian was shocked, insulting them as bandits in uniform, but couldn't finish speaking. Rain advised Lillian to yield, but she was furious, seeing it clearly as robbery. A soldier grew suspicious, ordering everyone out of the carriage for inspection. The tense atmosphere was about to erupt. Rain calmly stepped down from the carriage. A soldier immediately blocked him, loudly asking his identity. Upon seeing Trist, he froze, recognizing an old acquaintance. Rain suddenly turned to ask Trist about this connection. Trist gloomily explained they were former bandits allied with Edwin, later tolerated into becoming soldiers. One suddenly pointed at Trist, accusing him of not paying. He slapped Trist hard across the face to intimidate. Trist panicked, insisting he had already paid. But the soldier still drew his weapon, forcing them to hand over 5 more gold coins. Before Trist could react, Rain intervened, calm yet authoritative, denouncing the unjust taxation. The soldier angrily shouted to know Rain's identity, but when his gaze shifted to Lee, He immediately changed demeanor, revealing blatant lust. Sensing danger, Trist hastily paid 5 coins to protect his friends. The soldier quickly snatched the money, but he did not stop. Instead, he pressed in on Leah with vile intent. Before he could act, Rain seized his wrist tightly, restraining him. Rain's voice turned cold, declaring their lives were no longer worth sparing. Furious, the man lunged like a beast, but never reached him. Leah struck first. In an instant, he fell motionless, leaving his comrades frozen in terror. Rain coolly gave a brief order: kill them all. The soldiers panicked, fleeing and screaming that Rain was a murderer. They cried for help, but Leah closed in, ruthlessly cutting them down one by one, blood soaking the earth, corpses piling. Rain silently observed, assessing their power as merely ordinary. His father's words echoed, warning him to avoid war with foreign powers. He grew certain that Esling's army was too weak and would collapse in chaos. Leah still showed no mercy. She finished the last man, his death scream echoing. At that moment, a majestic roar thundered, demanding who dared cause disorder at the border. The surviving soldiers revived, hope rekindled, faces lit with joy. For General Caesar had arrived, his presence making them believe they were shielded. Rain also turned his gaze toward the newly arrived general. He analyzed Caesar's strength, noting skill but dangerously poor loyalty, like an arrogant incompetent. He bluntly called his name, mentioning the Holker clan and his elder brother holding a prized land. Caesar gave a short laugh, intrigued by someone who knew his private affairs. Rain, without hesitation, revealed himself as the younger brother of Prisha Edgar. The battlefield fell silent, both soldiers and Caesar stunned by his true identity. Caesar murmured, recalling an important memory. A letter from his brother resurfaced, urging him to protect young Master Rain, for Esling would soon belong to him. But another memory intruded. Eldric once offered gold, stirring his ambition with the Grand Duke's disdain. Now Caesar's mind was torn, loyalty to the clan or a path of power with Eldric. The first temptation rose, the hunger for status. Caesar stifled his struggle, loudly accusing Rain of impersonation and ordering his men to kill him. Leah instantly warned, declaring she would cut Caesar down if he dared rebel. The subordinate soldiers panicked, begging him not to commit treason against the Grand Duke's kin. But Caesar remained indifferent, scorning them, reminding he had long betrayed already. He accused Rain of being cold-blooded, slaughtering elves and crushing nobles who should have been executed long ago. Caesar declared his ambition: to kill Rain, flee to the empire, and trade it for title and glory. The soldiers, though fearful, began to waver after hearing him. Thoughts rose in their minds. Following the general at least offered a chance to survive. Leah immediately realized Caesar was skillfully manipulating the soldiers' minds, turning them into rebels against Rain. The troops shouted in unison they would follow Caesar, believing only then they had a future. Caesar laughed triumphantly, granting Rain a chance to leave last words. Rain calmly replied, declaring Caesar's arrogance had already dug his own grave. Caesar roared in rage, ordering his men to kill Rain at once. He shouted that Rain was the calamity that must be destroyed before the war. Leah drew her blade, ready to fight. She tore away the hindering hem of her dress for freer movement. Then she stepped forward with burning determination in her eyes. Leah stormed into battle like a raging tempest. Each of her strikes swiftly felled enemies. Every move of hers revealed clearly absolute superiority and skill over the crude soldiers. One soldier tried to ambush Rain, but he stood firm, trusting Leah to intervene. And just as expected, she appeared in time, blocking the strike and shielding him. Rain called Caesar directly, offering him a chance to surrender and live. Caesar bellowed, placing a bounty of 1,000 gold coins on Rain's head. Blinded by greed, the soldiers swarmed at Leah. A bald man charged first, but Leah instantly kicked him, flying to the ground. In a fleeting moment, she wiped out all remaining soldiers. Seeing the battle turn dire, Caesar ordered the mages to attack Leah. The mages immediately chanted, casting ice spells at her. At first, Leah thought she had blocked them, but it turned out to be a trap. The spell was not meant to harm, but to bind, and it worked. Caesar's hope flared, commanding an assault on Rain at once. Rain stayed calm, tossing a hammer to Leah, telling her to break free and leap high. She caught the hammer in midair, then shattered the icy restraints holding her, and soared upward like a bird breaking free. Rain muttered about his past electrical studies, now ready to be used. He hurled a coil of wire onto the ground. As most soldiers wore metal armor, the current instantly spread through their ranks. Rain thought to himself that luckily his rubber shoes shielded him from the shock. The soldiers panicked, whispering he wielded thunder magic. Rain smirked, regretting he had no camera to record the scene as proof of electricity's power. Caesar went mad, shouting for his troops to attack again. But one soldier, trembling, refused, saying Rain used terrifying dark arts that killed anyone who approached. Caesar, enraged, instantly swung his sword and beheaded the man. He roared that cowards had no right to exist and he needed no fearful weaklings. He declared the soldiers had only two choices: die by rain or by his own hand, while defeating rain might grant survival. Another soldier nervously stepped forward, but unexpectedly he remained completely unharmed. Leah suspiciously asked why the magic had no effect on that soldier. Rain explained it was only an experiment with lithium batteries whose energy had run out. Leah urgently suggested retreat before the enemy regrouped to counterattack. Rain calmly reassured her, declaring death would soon come for Caesar. Caesar mistook it as Rain's exhaustion and gleefully urged his army forward. But just as the troops moved, a colossal lightning bolt exploded from the sky, paralyzing the battlefield. Caesar trembled, fearing the Mage Council had arrived to doom him. From the glowing aura, Selena emerged, scornfully mocking Caesar as a dog barking at its master. She turned to Rain, playfully asking if she came just in time. Rain smiled back, praising Selena's punctuality and noting the lithium batteries were fully drained. Selena widened her eyes, curious about the battery experiment's results. Rain laughed, promising to explain in detail after capturing Caesar. Selena excitedly agreed, declaring it was time to unleash lightning. She ordered her mage comrades to annihilate the rebels and show them their true place. In a blink, the entire mage squad unleashed fierce attacks. Magical energy surged everywhere, shaking the battlefield violently. The rebel soldiers screamed in despair, their bodies turning to ash, leaving eerie silence. The sight of charred corpses terrified the survivors, who fled desperately. Caesar stood frozen, furious as his troops collapsed, vowing to kill Rain. The mages suddenly focused their full assault on Caesar. A massive energy pillar shot straight at him. Caesar struggled to dodge, cursing that Rain must die. He charged with his sword, aiming to strike Rain with murderous intent. Leah suddenly appeared like lightning crashing down. She blocked the sword barehanded right before Rain. Caesar was stunned, realizing Leah was a terrifying shield for Rain. Without hesitation, Leah launched a counterattack. A single devastating kick struck. Leah's kick sent Caesar crashing violently into the cliffside. The impact erupted dust and countless fragments into the air. When the smoke cleared, Caesar lay unconscious, his once proud form now a broken body. As he slowly regained consciousness, he opened his eyes to see Rain calmly seated across, gaze steady. Rain smirked faintly, teasing that he thought Caesar would sleep long, while Caesar only glared with hatred. Rain spoke deliberately, recalling Caesar's independent past at the border, then asked when he began serving Eldrick. Caesar froze, unsettled, panicking as he demanded how Rain knew that secret. Rain replied coldly, saying he had long seen his true nature, likening him to a venomous snake, and warned that Eldrick's betrayal was always predictable. He declared Caesar was living proof that gave him grounds to expose the city lord immediately. Caesar sneered, mocking Rain as delusional, insisting Eldrick was the most devious and far more powerful than him in this territory. Rain remained calm, saying the evidence might not topple him yet, but the tax records were the key to stop Eldrick and his allies from bleeding the city dry, rebuilding Esling in turn. Caesar burst out laughing, mocking that such dreams were hopeless since all nobles fed off Eldrick's corruption and would defend the rotten system to the end. Rain only curled his lips, his sharp gaze piercing into him. He spoke calmly but chillingly, comparing life with noble titles, saying the dead were nothing but corpses. A clear threat. Caesar's face changed, sweating in panic as he trembled, warning Rain his plan would turn Esling into a sea of blood, since he could not slaughter all nobles. Rain leaned closer, voice firm, declaring Esling's nobles had only two paths: follow Eldrick and die miserably, or stand with him to build a fair Esling where all had chances. He smirked, asking Caesar to guess their choice. Then Rain fixed his eyes on the map, coldly calculating as he began sketching plans for the future. He told himself Esling was not yet strong enough to withstand assaults, and its decayed walls must be repaired quickly to survive. His fingers moved slowly across the map, probing each surrounding land. He judged the west had Saintess Isera to handle elf diplomacy, the east was secure under Second Sister, but the north bordering Soren posed real danger with high risk of war. Leah interjected, reporting they had seized the border fortress and acquired 350,000 gold coins. Rain immediately praised her, then ordered the border troops to move in for takeover, grant rich rewards, and prepare a carriage for his return to Esling. Soon after, Rain approached the carriage where Selena awaited, her face bright as the morning sun. As he stepped inside, he thanked the Mage Council for their aid, acknowledging they had excelled. Selena beamed, calling it a small matter, then quickly changed the subject with eager eyes. She curiously asked about lithium batteries, how they release energy, and the recharging process. Ryan laughed and promised to patiently explain on the way back to Esling. Selina was just about to respond. Then Malcolm rushed in pale with fear, shouting that something urgent had happened. Selina frowned, ordering him to take a deep breath and speak clearly. Malcolm swallowed hard and screamed that Eldrick had betrayed them, seizing control of Esling City, making the air instantly tense. The bad news left Selina frozen, while Rain stayed calm as if he had foreseen it. He reasoned that Eldrick had crossed the line, and rebellion was inevitable. Selina worried, blaming herself for drawing all the mages away, giving Eldrick the chance to take the city. Rain turned to reassure her, his steady tone carrying a calming force. He declared that Eldrick had doomed himself by choosing rebellion, even if he hadn't realized death awaited. His certainty eased Selina. When they reached the sealed city gate, Rain led the troops forward and loudly summoned Eldrick to appear. He demanded an explanation for why the gates were locked. From above, Eldrick appeared smugly, pretending surprise and asking what Rain wanted. Ryan accused him of daring to betray his own father. Eldrick, furious, snapped that it was too late to ask. He had long questioned why Rain's father abandoned him to rule a remote land. He recalled once fighting side by side with Rain's father, sharing the dream of building an empire. But once the man reached the peak of power, he cast Eldrick aside, dumping him in a ruined city. Instead of being valued, his whole family had to struggle to survive in that decay. Bitterly, he confessed he had sent countless letters begging for reassignment, but no reply came, his resentment piling up, now blaming Rain's father as the culprit. He declared those now standing with him were once men of Rain's father, but treated unfairly, so this was reclaiming rightful power, not rebellion. Ryan scoffed coldly, dismissing it all as excuses. He said a schemer like Eldrick should have better reasoning than such petty whining. Rain turned to the nobles behind Eldrick, warning this was their last chance to surrender. Otherwise, in 3 days, they would pay dearly. Hearing Rain's words, Eldrick's nobles burst out laughing as if at a joke. One mocked that in 3 days Rain couldn't even reach the city gates, let alone make them regret. Seeing his side's confidence, Eldrick sneered and threw out a wager. Rain kept his expression unchanged, directly asking about the terms. Eldrick arrogantly repeated before the whole city that Esling's fate would be decided by this gamble. Rain looked straight at Eldrick and asked without hesitation what would happen if he broke the city. Eldrick sneered, declaring he would personally admit defeat if that happened. He sharply challenged whether Rain had the courage to accept a life-and-death wager. Selina quickly cut in, warning Rain not to be reckless since the Grand Duke's army would arrive in days, making risk unnecessary. Leah agreed, saying they should wait for reinforcements for a certain victory without gambling. Seizing his hesitation, Eldrick mocked and taunted that Ryan was all talk and truly a coward. Rain remained firm, boldly declaring he would win and that the word failure did not exist in his dictionary. Eldrick burst out laughing, publicly announcing Rain had accepted the wager and warning him not to break his word. Then he pretended to suddenly remember, smirking as he revealed another shocking news. He said the Orvis Empire army had learned of the rebellion and was marching in. Within 10 days, Rain would face both him and the invaders. Eldrick concluded with scornful laughter, certain that Rain would not flee when the enemy arrived. The scene shifted to Rain's military camp. Generals and key figures gathered to strategize, the atmosphere heavy and suffocating. Selina spoke first, worrying that Esling's walls, though degraded, were still very hard to breach quickly. A soldier raised the issue that their current camp position was too dangerous and suggested retreat to avoid risk. Rain calmly replied, affirming the real threat was neither Eldrick nor Esling's walls. He stated the main danger was the Orvis Legion approaching, forcing him to focus on countermeasures. He turned to ask Leah about collecting fire-starting materials. Leah happily reported they had gathered a huge amount from the nearby lake, even exceeding the request. Ryan was satisfied and immediately ordered Selina to use ice magic to chill the lake to freezing. Selina froze in surprise, puzzled how this related to breaching the city. Rain calmly reassured that the purpose would be clear in time, then everyone left to handle their tasks. Rain stood at the front line, eyes resolute, signaling the start. Soldiers charged forward without weapons, carrying only bundles of wood, grass, and shields. A strange army, weaponless, stormed the city with wild momentum. Eldrick watched from above, curiosity slowly turning into confusion as he scanned the battlefield. He realized the enemy carried no weapons, only throwing wood and grass at the city's base. Eldrick angrily muttered, demanding his subordinates if they had ever seen such an attack. An officer hesitantly guessed the enemy might intend to burn the walls. Eldrick raged, calling him stupid since no one could burn stone walls with ordinary fire. The soldier didn't even have time to explain further. A messenger soldier rushed in, urgently reporting the latest news. He shouted that Rain's troops had set fire to the piled wood. Eldrick sneered, seeing Rain as a fool making a useless spectacle before everyone. A general nervously asked if they should send mages to put out the fire since archers were ineffective. Eldrick waved it off, saying it wasn't worth wasting magic. He even ordered arrows conserved, not squandered on that strange army. Eldrick was certain Rain would lose credibility within 3 days with this foolish plan. He had no idea the true scheme lay hidden behind the seemingly pointless burning wood. 3 days passed, and in Eldrick's lordly mansion, the strange spectacle still continued. In the great hall, during a feast like a festival, people mocked Rain as a failure, until a soldier reported the enemy had stopped burning. Eldrick paused his drink, scoffing that Rain had run out of wood and admitted defeat. He called the nobles to go witness Rain's humiliation and forced submission. The crowd cheered, convinced Rain lost after 3 days of only burning wood, though some still doubted because the wall was unbearably hot. Eldrick remained dismissive, leading them all outside, laughing at Rain for stopping. Rain sternly countered, declaring Eldrick and the nobles had only 2 choices: surrender and confess or die pointlessly. Eldrick laughed, mocking where Rain got his confidence, saying he was only making a clown of himself. The nobles roared with laughter, Eldrick triumphantly repeating the 3-day wager and claiming Rain had cornered himself into defeat. They all jeered together, mocking Rain as an empty talker, declaring Eldrick the true victor. Rain calmly replied that he had given them a chance in vain and warned all consequences were theirs to bear. Without delay, he ordered Selena to carry out the decisive step. Selena stepped forward, her fingers flashing with sparks, preparing to unleash destructive magic. Eldrick's face turned pale, instantly shouting for mages to raise shields as tension filled the air. For everyone knew the terrifying power hidden in Selena's magic. Barriers of energy rose, nobles still relaxed, waiting for Rain to fail. Selena raised her hand, then unleashed her strike. A massive lightning bolt tore through the sky, its power shaking the very space. The mages braced with all their strength, ready to take the blow head-on. But the lightning suddenly veered, crashing into the city gate instead of the barrier. Eldrick's side was stunned, the deafening blast and thick smoke leaving them frozen. Eldrick burst out laughing, insisting Selena's strike did nothing, and Rain was only clowning himself. But then a drop of water fell on his face, making him look up in shock. The clear sky darkened, icy winds rose, and rain poured down, planting unease in his heart. Below the wall, Rain sternly ordered his troops to carry out the next phase. The soldiers rushed forward in unison, shields overhead, carrying buckets of cold water toward the fortress. Rain glanced at Selena, seeing her exhausted yet still powerful enough to alter the weather. He silently admired her, realizing that strength had turned the entire situation. He reassured her that cold water against the heated wall would crack the stone, opening a path to victory. Suddenly, Leah shouted, making Rain instantly look toward the fortress. The first wave of soldiers reached it, tipping buckets and pouring white streams over the city gate. Cold water seeped into the burning stone, filling every crevice. A faint cracking sound echoed, barely audible. Then came a series of sharp snaps as fractures spread like a spiderweb across the ramparts. Eldrick, stunned, denied it, insisting the wall was too solid to collapse from such tricks. But the ground shook violently, the trembling quickly becoming an earthquake, panicking the nobles. Eldrick struggled to command calm, but his words were betrayed by reality. A terrible crack roared out. The wall shattered, massive stones collapsed, and the noble troops screamed in terror. Dust and smoke engulfed everything. Only the sound of falling rubble remained. Rain raised his sword high, giving the order to attack, his voice thunderous. Rain coldly declared, those who dropped their weapons would be captured, and those who resisted would be cut down on the spot, regardless of rank. His army surged through the breach, swiftly seizing key points and crushing the remnants. Selena stood frozen, staring at the fallen ramparts, bewildered that even she couldn't achieve such a feat, yet Rain had succeeded. Rain calmly told Selena to return, assuring her the enemy was utterly defeated. Amid the ruins of the city, Eldrick staggered, his body battered and drained. He bitterly realized his arrogance had let Rain outmaneuver him from the start, yet he still dreamed of fleeing to seek Orvis reinforcements. But as he tried to escape, a dreadful intuition froze his steps. Before him, the nobles who once sided with him now turned back, their eyes full of hatred. They furiously cursed him, accusing him of abandoning comrades to save himself. Eldrick trembled, realizing he had become the enemy of his own allies. Meanwhile, Rain led his army in a triumphant march through the city, boldly declaring victory. The citizens marveled, astonished that in only 3 days the city had changed hands with almost no serious casualties. Selena eagerly asked Rain how he managed to break the city walls, still unable to comprehend it. Her curiosity flared, and she clung to Rain, refusing to let him go without an answer. Finally, Rain explained that the wall collapsed due to the law of thermal expansion. Selena widened her eyes, admitting she had never heard of that concept. Rain simply explained, hot objects expand, cold ones contract, like milk swelling when boiled. He revealed he had used that principle to break the wall but withheld details, as Eldrick still had to be dealt with. Afterward, Rain and his soldiers moved to the collapsed section of the wall. There, they witnessed an unexpected scene. A noble pretended to be trapped under rubble, crying and begging for his life. Rain, wary, bluntly exposed the trick and demanded to know his real intent. The noble groveled, admitting he had been deceived by Eldrick and had betrayed Rain. Another confirmed it, saying they had tried to capture Eldrick but he escaped, then begged for mercy. Rain coldly reproached them for scorning the chance earlier. Regret now was too late. One man, desperate, offered all his wealth to survive. Rain sneered, saying killing them would make the riches his anyway. The noble trembled, warning that if he killed them, he would lose loyalty and become a feared tyrant. Rain dismissed it, saying loyalty born of greed was worthless, proven by their betrayal of Eldrick. He ordered their imprisonment so they could reflect on their treachery in the dungeon. At the same time, in a mansion, Eldrick frantically spoke to a cloaked man, blaming everything on Rain for destroying the wall. The man was shocked, asking how it was even possible. Eldrick described the burning and dousing that cracked and collapsed the wall. The cloaked man mocked him, saying no one would believe such nonsense. He insisted no fortress could fall from fire and water alone. It must have been magic, but Eldrick swore otherwise. Eldrick urged immediate escape, or Rain would arrive and leave no way out. The cloaked man began to feel the urgency. He pulled out a teleportation scroll, but before he could use it, Rain's voice rang out. He mocked, scolding them for trying to flee without greeting their guest. Eldrick panicked, shocked Rain had arrived so quickly. Rain laughed, saying Eldrick ran so clumsily it was easy to track him. He added that Eldrick's own soldiers had led the way, exposing him as the mastermind. Rain asked the masked man why he hid his face. The man replied with disdain, claiming Rain's victory was only temporary. He warned the Orvis army was coming, that Rain had doomed himself by breaking the wall, and vowed personal revenge. He hurriedly activated the teleportation scroll. Rain immediately ordered Leah to stop him. She swiftly threw a dagger. The dagger tore his cloak and pinned his shoulder. He was forced against the wall. His mask fell from his face, revealing a scarred visage. Leah recognized him but had no time to react. The scroll glowed, beginning the teleportation. Before vanishing, he roared a vow to return for revenge on Rain. He dissolved into space. Leah guiltily apologized to Rain for failing to stop him. Rain calmly said it was fine. Now that they'd seen his face, it would be easier to track him later. Leah hesitantly admitted knowing him, prompting Rain to tease that he was her old flame. Leah hurriedly denied it, revealing he was Revan Edwin once under the Grand Duke, but rebelled to follow Soren against Alferia. Rain was surprised, asking if he was related to Lucas Edwin, whom he had just executed. Leah confirmed, explaining Revan once led the Edwin family but abandoned them to join Soren. Rain smirked, realizing Eldrick was not the only traitor in this city. Selena reported that the situation had been stabilized, but she worried the city walls were heavily damaged, impossible to repair in time, and the burn-quench method left severe destruction. Rain casually replied he had a plan. The Orvis army could not touch him. He stepped into the square, preparing to address the citizens. Selena watched, thinking the panicked people would be hard for Rain to reassure. Rain's voice echoed as he called out to the whole city. He announced there was a grave matter. He declared the Orvis army was coming, and within days they would reach the gates, so he had to warn everyone to be ready. The crowd immediately panicked, whispering, then shouting. They were terrified by the news of the approaching enemy. Selena frantically questioned Rain. The people murmured, despairing that after just escaping war they faced another, with many wanting to flee the city. One regretted it, praising Rain for improving their lives, but now they had to abandon their homes. Selena accused Rain of spreading fear, but he countered that telling the truth was not wrong. She grew angry, saying common folk could be paralyzed by fear. Rain argued the people did not need calmness. He believed emotions fueled fighting spirit, while reason was needed only for generals. Selena was stunned, not yet grasping his intent. Rain pulled out a letter and raised it for all to see. He said in the letter, the Orvis Empire insulted Esling citizens as cowards who only knew how to run. He mocked that even rats defended their burrows, yet Orvis despised Esling people as less than that. The crowd instantly grew enraged, their fury rising. They shouted, vowing not to let Orvis plunder them. All swore to hold their ground and fight to the death for the city. Rain cheered them, affirming they were not cowards and would be the vanguard warriors. The crowd blazed with resolve, swearing to resist. Rain declared Orvis was destined to fail. Afterward, Rain returned to the manor, entering his study to plan defenses. Leah approached to urge him to rest. Rain refused, saying time was short, the enemy stronger, and without strategy, the city would fall. Leah hesitated, admitting this time she could not understand his intent. Rain smiled, explaining he had planted belief in the people, giving them courage to fight. Thus, when the enemy came, even the old and young would be protected, and the city easier to defend. Leah, fearful, urged Rain to retreat since he would be the most dangerous target when the enemy arrived. Rain reassured her, saying the weak had been evacuated and he would stay to defend the city. He picked up a book and asked Leah about its contents. Specifically, he wondered about something called dark green oil. Leah recalled it was once a flammable substance used by witches. Rain immediately understood. He guessed it was gasoline, with colors differing by refinement level, and believed that substance to be such fuel. He ordered it brought to the warehouse for inspection. Arriving with Leah, Rain told the soldiers to open the door. Inside, he requested the barrels be taken out, warning to keep fire away. He instructed absolute safety in transport, and the soldiers promised caution. Gazing at the piles of gold, Rain remembered Eldrick, who plundered but never enjoyed it. He vowed that once the chaos ended, the gold would build industry, usher in steam engines, and change the city's fate. Soon, soldiers carried out the barrels of dark green oil. Rain personally opened a lid. He confirmed his suspicion. It was truly gasoline. Rain realized with this resource, the invaders could hardly win. The scene shifted to the Orvis Empire camp. Raven knelt before Castile, admitting defeat. Castile was unsurprised, dismissing him as useless. He mocked that after years of occupation they lost in 3 days, then revealed himself as Grand Duke of Orvis, Castile Walderon. Eldrick hastily excused, saying they fell because Rain used a forbidden talisman to break the walls, otherwise they could have held until Castile arrived. Castile doubted, questioning why Alferia would waste such a precious talisman just to protect a son. Raven interjected, claiming the talisman worked only once, the wall was already broken, and the enemy had no time to repair, so this was a chance to attack. Castile cut him off, declaring he was not a fool, calling Raven trash and ordering him to leave. Raven panicked, enraged at being cast aside. Castile coldly said Raven was a tool with no more value, betraying Alferia had gained him nothing. He handed Raven a letter from the king. Raven trembled as he held it, the words striking like a blade. The letter accused him of starting the war, and decreed he would be sacrificed to ease the feud between the two dukes. Raven raved, cursing Castile for betrayal after his loyal service. Castile remained indifferent, ordering Raven imprisoned until the day he would be sacrificed after victory. Soldiers dragged him away as Raven screamed injustice, but no one cared. Eldrick stood trembling, regretting siding with Castile, thinking even Rain was more trustworthy. Castile coldly turned to Eldrick, demanding a reason not to treat him like Raven. Eldrick panicked, begging that he knew many secrets useful to Orvis. Castile grew curious, pressing Eldrick on what secrets could benefit Orvis. The scene shifted to the Thrawn estate. Prisha Edgar, Rain's elder sister, sat in a luxurious office. The room was silent, except for the sound of pages turning as she studied documents intently. Gwen, the maid, reported a letter from Rain, written by Leah Alice. Hearing of her brother, Prisha smiled, recalling childhood memories, planning to visit when free. But upon opening the letter, her expression darkened, the atmosphere turned cold. She slammed the letter down, ordering Willis Holker summoned. Gwen hurried to comply. Soon Willis was brought in, kneeling before Prisha. He hesitantly asked the reason. Prisha coldly accused him of betrayal. Willis panicked, denying it, saying the Holker house had no reason to turn, as they had just gained a trade route. Prisha tossed the letter, ordering him to read it himself. Willis trembled as he picked it up. The letter said Esling was in chaos. Eldrick and nobles rebelled. Caesar Holker joined Castile to kill Rain but failed. Caesar was executed, warning to beware House Holker and to send reinforcements since Orvis was coming. Willis sweated, shocked at Caesar's treason, not understanding the motive, only seeing his family dragged into peril. Prisha asked directly if he had any defense or was ready to accept punishment. Willis insisted Holker was loyal for generations. Caesar may have erred, but the family did not betray, swearing on honor. He recalled writing to Caesar to protect Rain, saying he could never have turned against him. Prisha saw his shock and sincerity, sensing Willis too was blindsided by the betrayal. Perhaps Holker was innocent. Willis knelt, begging for a chance to prove loyalty. Prisha asked how he intended to prove it. Willis replied he had sent his only daughter with troops to aid Rain. Prisha was shocked, worrying his daughter was still young, untrained, and taking her to war risked the family's destruction. Willis was resolute, declaring Holker would sacrifice all to preserve honor. He said if his daughter died, he would take up the sword, and if he fell, other Holker blood would fight, never suffering the shame of treason even at the cost of life. Prisha listened, sensing sincerity, but could not be careless with Rain's safety. She used a communication spell, ordering Gwen to send people to watch Rosalind Holker closely, and if signs of betrayal appeared, to eliminate her immediately, prioritizing Rain's safety above all. The scene shifted near Esling at a rugged cliff. Icy winds blew across the cliffs overlooking the city. Duke Castile, cloaked, stood on a peak gazing scornfully at Esling. Eldrick, in fine clothes, bowed, flattering Castile that Esling already belonged to him with the walls broken. He smiled nervously, fearing Rain had already reinforced defenses with mages. Castile burst into loud laughter, mocking Rain for wasting effort on walls and moats like children stacking stones. He said to let Rain exhaust himself, and when he attacked, defenses would collapse, ignoring Eldrick's worry. Castile analyzed that on plains, walls, and moats were of little use, unlike in treacherous mountains. He declared Rain foolish for wasting mages on such useless work, instead of conserving strength to resist Orvis. He asserted that when they attacked, Rain's mages would be exhausted, and no one could stop the army. Eldrick's eyes lit up, flattering that Castile's vision far surpassed Rain's. A general stepped forward, advising to besiege and cut supplies instead of direct assault. Castile spoke coldly, implicitly threatening, asking if he was doubting his ability. The tense air made the general kneel in fear, pleading he only wished to reduce casualties. Castile growled that soldiers were born to die, casualties were training, and battles were drills for recruits. He ignored the advice, ordering the chief mage summoned to directly insult Rain, hoping to force his surrender. In Esling, Rain frowned, annoyed that work had been stalled for half a month. He muttered that finding 5 people with strong attributes should have been easy, yet progress was lacking. Leah rushed in, reporting that Castile had arrived at the gates, seeking to meet him. Rain stepped onto the ramparts. Castile immediately stared, sneering, proclaiming grandeur as he granted Rain an opportunity. Before he finished, Rain mocked him, feigning surprise and calling him a fool, making Esling soldiers burst out laughing. Leah coolly confirmed with a serious tone that indeed, the fool was Grand Duke Castile. Castile's face darkened, enraged, roaring that even Rain's father never dared such insolence, warning that underestimating him was a fatal mistake. Rain calmly folded his arms, bluntly asking Castile's purpose in coming. Castile flushed, shouting that he was offering Rain the chance to kneel and surrender to spare the people's lives. Rain sneered, mocking the kindness of an enemy. He stepped forward, eyes blazing, turning the offer back. If Castile didn't want to die, he should retreat, or else he would bleed. Castile roared, accusing Rain of growing ever more arrogant. He emphasized that real life was not as easy as Rain's delusions. Castile boasted of bringing 100,000 troops, threatening to crush Esling if Rain did not surrender. Rain shook his head, telling Leah to remind the arrogant man of the consequences of making noise at one's doorstep. Without hesitation, Leah lifted her dress, drew a hidden weapon, and hurled it forcefully at the enemy. The steel blade shot through the air with a whistle. A mage shouted a warning to Castile, but the barrier was instantly torn apart, and the blade grazed Castile's face, leaving a bleeding mark. The mage rushed in panic to check his condition. Castile, furious, roared that Rain would pay for this wound. Rain smirked, saying it was only a warning. If he had meant to kill, Castile's head would be gone. Castile stepped back, vowing they would meet again on the battlefield. Rain instructed Selena to ready defenses, but avoid rash moves lest Orvis exploit them. Castile returned to camp, where generals, seeing blood on his face, pressed him with questions. He raged that Rain had dared provoke him, ordering immediate attack, swearing to make Rain suffer humiliation. His subordinates panicked, dissuading him, saying the soldiers were exhausted after days of marching and needed rest. Castile went mad, beating the general who advised him. He shouted that his army had no place for cowards. Another soldier explained they weren't afraid, only exhausted, and needed preparation to cross the river or they'd be sitting ducks. Many others agreed, begging for time to recover in order to fight decisively. Castile dismissed them, declaring delay meant defeat, only speed ensured victory. He rallied the troops, proclaiming a preemptive strike would catch the enemy off guard and seize initiative. A soldier timidly raised a dissenting opinion. Castile ignored him, forcing the entire army to march immediately. In the Orvis camp, soldiers complained of exhaustion, realizing soldiering was far harsher than expected. One cheerful man cut in, boasting he had just seen something interesting, urging others to hear. He revealed there was a flock of sheep nearby, suggesting they catch them for a feast. The group rejoiced, eager for food and strength for tomorrow. But a general suddenly appeared, ordering assembly to prepare for battle at once. The soldiers were stunned, groaning from hunger and fatigue, begging to eat first to fight better. The general coldly reminded them this was Castile's order, no eating or sleeping. The troops grew dejected, swallowing their bitterness in silence. They staggered forward, pushing the army close to the city. On the walls, Rain closely monitored every movement, searching for a strategy but finding no time, before being stunned to see the enemy leaping into the river, recklessly swimming across. Rain froze, asking his commander if they had ever faced Orvis-style tactics before. The commander confirmed he had fought Orvis many times and knew their methods well. Rain, curious, asked why Castile's troops looked starving and weak. Was it normal or unusual? The commander explained most were mere recruits, visibly hungry, likely unfed for many days. Rain was puzzled, questioning why Castile would bring such a worn-out army to battle. Was it not suicide? The commander suggested Castile might have run out of provisions, unable to feed them properly, but he admitted that seemed unlikely, since they had previously shown strong attack power. Rain urged him to analyze further. The commander proposed another theory. The recruits were only sacrifices, thrown in as arrow fodder before the elite troops appeared. Rain was horrified at such cruelty. He asked why a leader would treat his soldiers' lives like trash. Surely the royal authority must know. The commander sneered, saying most nobles were like that, with only a few compassionate men like Rain or Alferio being rare exceptions. Rain grew furious, vowing not to forgive, realizing he had underestimated Castile's brutality. The commander suggested using all available arrows to wipe out the recruits immediately, but Rain shook his head, insisting he would not choose that way, leaving the commander confused. The commander argued that missing this chance was a grave mistake. Rain observed the enemy still collapsing from hunger and fatigue. He turned to Selena, ordering her to spread cold wind across the battlefield. Selena obeyed, stepping forward to cast wind magic. Rain watched the reaction closely. Castile sneered with disdain, thinking Rain foolish for wasting a mage's power. A general asked the reason for his criticism. Castile explained, "Rookies only forced Rain to waste arrows, but Rain consumed mage strength too soon. A fatal mistake." He confidently believed that once Rain's mage was exhausted, releasing his own magic forces would ensure victory. The surrounding generals all praised Castile's strategy. Castile, triumphant, mocked that Rain would soon kneel and beg. Meanwhile, the Orvis soldiers grew increasingly panicked. Seeing the enemy's large numbers, many rookies lost morale, cried, and fled. Some hid, begging for mercy, but they were shocked to realize the enemy had not fired any arrows. The Orvis general shouted angrily, demanding they grab weapons and charge if they wanted to survive. Selena continued maintaining the cold wind across the battlefield. She doubted and asked Rain why he only used cold wind instead of direct attacks. She even suggested that a strong lightning strike could shatter the enemy immediately. Rain firmly refused, not choosing that method. He explained that victory lay not in troops or weapons, but in spirit. Once spirit collapsed, soldiers could no longer resist. Rain analyzed that history showed hunger-drained soldiers, cold broke will. In just minutes, the enemy would collapse, abandoning hopes of besieging. Exactly as he predicted, Orvis soldiers trembled, wept, unwilling to fight, only wishing to escape the harshness. The commander screamed, ordering troops to hold the line. He cursed, forcing them to grab weapons and charge. The soldiers trembled and sobbed, saying their hands were frozen, their stomachs empty, and they had no strength to fight. The commander, enraged, sent someone to report the situation to Castile. A soldier rushed back to the rear camp, seeking Castile to deliver urgent news. Before he could speak, he choked with anger seeing the rear troops feasting while the front line perished. Swallowing rage, he reported, soldiers were exhausted from hunger and cold, begging Castile to let them retreat, recover, then fight again. Castile's face turned cold as he sneered with contempt. He mocked, calling the messenger a coward unworthy of his army. The soldier knelt, pleading he wasn't cowardly, only asking for food and drink to regain fighting strength. Castile harshly rejected, scolding weakness, then declared he would personally lead the troops. A general panicked, begging the commander not to risk himself. But Castile arrogantly said he wanted to prove his skill to the generals, showing them true leadership. He immediately gathered forces, leading the army closer to the city. Castile ordered the mages to build a bridge across the river for smoother advancement. The mages all obeyed at once, not daring to delay. They began casting spells to create the bridge. Castile boldly promised a huge reward for whoever captured Rain Edgar alive. He pledged the prize would ensure a lifetime of comfort without labor. His golden promise lit up the soldiers' eyes, filling them with fiery spirit, ready to charge to the death. In Rain's camp, news arrived. This time the enemy wasn't attacking in waves, but preparing a full assault. Rain calmly ordered his soldiers to pour out all the green liquid. He instructed them to flood the moat completely to block the flow, allowing no water to escape. Leah immediately accepted the order, assuring it would be done. Soldiers quickly operated the pipes, releasing the bright green liquid into the moat. Meanwhile, the Orvis army remained unaware of the ambush being set. In reality, that liquid was gasoline, slowly spreading in the water. The enemy advanced unsuspectingly, oblivious to the looming disaster. The scene shifted to Rosalind, who was leading troops from Prisia to aid Rain. Her mind held only the thought of protecting Rain at all costs. She recalled her father's words. Halker's fate depended on this. Succeed and the family lives, fail and they perish. A soldier timidly begged for rest, complaining that 3 days of heavy marching had drained both men and horses. Rosalind dismissed it, urgently asking how much farther remained. The soldier replied about 1 day's journey left. With rising resolve, Rosalind ordered a mage to open the map to calculate the precise route. She examined it, assuming Orvis had already reached the fortress and might seize the city, but the people were safe thanks to food stores from Rhine. While pondering, she sensed someone watching. Rosalind immediately shouted for Knox to reveal himself. She had already suspected he was trailing them. The surrounding soldiers looked around but saw no one. At that moment, a spatial gate opened and Knox stepped out. He was Prisia's trusted mage, assigned to monitor Rosalind. A soldier panicked and shouted for battle readiness. Rosalind quickly reassured everyone. She said Knox was an ally, not an enemy. Knox, cold-faced, asked bluntly what she wanted. Rosalind laid out her plan. Cut Orvis' food supply to force retreat, protect Rain City, and needed Knox cooperation. Knox coldly reminded her he was only ordered to monitor, and if she harmed Rain, he would act, but he had no duty to assist. Rosalind was stunned, arguing that refusing to help was indirectly harming Rain. Knox hesitated, then admitted that for Rain's sake he would bend the rules, asking what she needed from him. Rosalind assigned him. She would strike directly, while Knox must block the moat to prevent Orvis reinforcements from entering. Once the enemy tried to cross, the surging waters would drown them, causing heavy losses. She believed this plan would both minimize her side's casualties and break the opponent's morale. The scene shifted to the fairy territory. The fairy queen was carefully reading the letter sent by Rain. She hesitated, weighing whether to trust humans in their proposal of mutual benefit. Alpharia showed contempt, saying humans were greedy and selfish, untrustworthy even among themselves, so elves could not rely on them. Another fairy objected, reminding that their race depended on humans to survive the harsh winters. A fairy warned that without cooperation, humans might cut food supplies, leaving the tribe starving in the cold season. The queen turned to Air, who admired humans, asking about Lord Esling. Air admitted feeling conflicted, judging Rain as intelligent, strong, not cruel but always prioritizing his people, generous to allies, ruthless to enemies. Ara reminded that Rain had solved their annual food shortage, providing surplus at low cost, stressing that cooperation brought profit while opposition meant ruin. A fairy praised Rain as a rare, outstanding talent. Alpharia opposed, saying everyone was overpraising Rain. She criticized Rain for constant wars, unlike a wise leader. Alpharia questioned Era's admiration for Rain, leaving Era flustered and speechless. The queen intervened, telling Alpharia to stay calm and avoid hasty decisions. She judged Rain as both excellent and suspicious, needing to see his performance on the battlefield. At that moment, the Orvis army closed in on the fortress, danger looming. Rain's soldiers fired volleys of arrows, raining down to halt the enemy's advance. Selena nervously asked Rain why he still held back against the foe. Rain calmly replied he was waiting for Castile's army to arrive to strike the decisive blow. Rain reassured Selena, promising to unleash a decisive strike to crush Orvis. Before she could respond, disaster struck. Orvis soldiers quickly scaled the walls. A Castile general joyfully reported victory for breaking the defenses. Castile, excited, urged his troops to attack. He ordered Rain captured alive to both humiliate and display power. Promised rewards, Orvis soldiers stormed forward like a tide. Rain smiled, seeing Castile fall perfectly into his trap. He turned to Selena, signaling to initiate the plan. The enemy massed troops close to the city, fierce battle erupting. Rain's soldiers fiercely protected their lord, treating his life as paramount. Rain ordered Selena to drop fireballs into the moat, but he told her to disguise the true target. Selena agreed, chanting spells with skilled movements. Multiple fireballs flared and shot into the moat. The enemy didn't expect the strikes to target the water. Castile panicked, urging his mages to raise shields. He demanded they block every attack. Immediately, Castile's mages formed a barrier to block all flames. A lieutenant worried their magic power was about to run out. Castile looked down on them, believing the enemy had run out of energy. He reasoned that the foe had already drained strength when controlling the wind earlier. Castile insisted the last strike was just a bluff. He arrogantly declared he had easily unraveled the scheme. The Orvis soldiers ignored the fireballs falling straight into the moat. They landed precisely in the water without missing at all. Castile laughed arrogantly, mocking the enemy. He sneered that the opposing mage was weak and always off target. He even mocked that Rain's plan backfired, while soldiers flattered and cheered him. Castile grew more arrogant, boasting he was the strongest pillar of the empire. Suddenly, a thunderous explosion erupted from the moat. Castile was horrified, not understanding why water caught fire. Orvis soldiers panicked as flames burned violently atop the water. Castile suspected it was a forbidden spell from an exceptionally strong expert. Fire spread everywhere, burning soldiers. The wind drove the Orvis army into chaotic screams of despair. Castile was stunned, unable to believe Rain had planned the trap long ago. As the raging fire spread, he abruptly awakened to reality. Seeing his men burned alive, he realized if he delayed, all would be lost, no matter his own skill. The problem was he had chosen the wrong opponent. Rain was nothing less than a demon capable of annihilating an entire army far beyond his imagination. A panicked general begged Castile to retreat quickly to escape, but he stubbornly ordered the mages to extinguish the flames, treating it as trivial. The exhausted mages reported their energy was completely drained, leaving Castile in despair, tasting hopelessness for the first time. Selena was stunned, realizing this was no ordinary magic but a terrifying forbidden spell. She secretly marveled at Rain's strategy, where even oil could cause destruction like high-level magic. Rain observed the devastated battlefield, feeling both sorrow and concern for the people. He understood the people needed a stable economy to avoid misery, otherwise they would be dragged into useless wars again. He handed the remaining matters to Selena, and she responded with full confidence. Selena immediately ordered a sweep, forcing the enemy to choose only between fleeing or dying. On the other side, Castile inhaled choking smoke, nearly collapsing, supported by a subordinate general. In bitterness, he felt the humiliation of defeat and the loss of all his efforts. When he returned to camp, he found it deserted without a single guard in sight. Before he could grasp the situation, a sudden strike descended from above. A massive sword pierced the ground before him, forcing him to stagger back in terror. Castile's heart pounded as he shouted to know the attacker's identity. As the smoke cleared, a figure emerged. It was Rosalind, smirking as she mocked his Orvis noble status. She declared she had long awaited the moment to capture such a valuable prey. Castile, terrified, tremblingly asked what Rosalind wanted from him. Castile tries to stay calm, but Rosalind coldly advances. She harshly questions him about Orvis' main force and Rain's safety. Without waiting, Rosalind strikes repeatedly. Castile groans and confesses to avoid more torment. He admits the army was destroyed, only he survived, proudly calling himself a Grand Duke. Rosalind grows angry, believing he is lying. She orders the interrogation to continue until a reliable confession comes. Then Rosalind goes deeper into the camp. She asks soldiers whether Castile has revealed anything. A soldier reports he keeps repeating the same story despite being beaten. Rosalind loses patience and slams the table. She commands to keep beating him while preparing to march to the border, fearing for Rain. The soldiers obey at once, promising to notify everyone. Rosalind considers Castile's words about a bridge over the moat. She realizes luring the enemy out and coordinating with Nox would make the bridge an advantage. While calculating, she suddenly sees someone approaching. She immediately alerts the army to battle readiness. The soldiers surround her, claiming to be unmatched elites. When seeing clearly, Rosalind is shocked it is an elf army. She instantly suspects they allied with Orvis against Rain. If true, Rain would face extreme danger. Rosalind accuses them of betrayal and cowardice. Alferia retorts, saying they only follow the Queen's order to meet Rain. Rosalind remains doubtful, thinking it's another lie like Castile's. Alferia grows furious, ordering archers ready, while Rosalind mocks the elves' simple tactics. The Fairy Queen intervenes, raising a magical barrier to stop fighting. She advises Rosalind to calm down, stressing the journey has a just cause. She explains they came by Rain's invitation and wish to avoid pointless battle unless Rosalind deems them enemies. Rosalind remains skeptical, demanding proof since Rain has not appeared. The Fairy Queen orders her attendant to bring the letter. Hera presents Rain's invitation letter. Rosalind checks the Edgar family seal and confirms its authenticity. She reluctantly accepts but insists on supervising the elf group throughout. The Fairy Queen agrees, saying such caution benefits both sides. After negotiations, Rosalind tells her troops to rest while keeping the plan intact. She secretly orders a subordinate to watch the elves, especially the mage. On the elf side, Alferia complains that being distrusted makes the trade meaningless. The Fairy Queen replies that humans are naturally suspicious, so they cannot be blamed. She stays cautious, hoping Rain won't disappoint her, or the consequences will be severe. At the same time, Rosalind leads her army straight to the border. A soldier reports Ender's flag still hangs on the fortress, with no sign of Orvis occupation. Rosalind realizes Castile might have told the truth, since he never changed his story despite torture. She quickly sets aside doubts, determined to meet Rain for clarity. With resolve, Rosalind orders the banner of Lady Prish raised to show reinforcements have come for Rain. They must cross the bridge quickly and reach the city before nightfall lest Rain be in danger. At the same time, inside the fortress, Rain stands amid a battlefield of corpses, silently observing the aftermath. He regrets losing the chance to use 100,000 prisoners for labor, now all dead in vain. Seeing his heavy face, Leah thinks Rain is merciful for mourning even enemies. She comforts him, saying invaders deserved their fate, and he should not grieve. Rain denies his sorrow is for the soldiers, but cannot finish explaining. A soldier rushes in reporting cavalry approaching from Orvis direction. He adds they fly the banner of the Second Lady, making allegiance uncertain. Soon it is clear. The force is Rosalind's, accompanied by the Fairy Queen. Rain quickly invites them for counsel, presenting his industrialization plan for jobs and prosperity. He asserts Esling will become the continent's financial hub if the elves invest, gaining both prestige and great profit. But the Fairy Queen refuses, saying the project is tempting but unsuitable for her people. She explains the elves live in harmony with nature, needing no modern industry to remain fulfilled and happy. Rhine counters that she misunderstands in thinking the elves gain nothing from industry. He argues demand often arises from society. New industries create new needs and people change with progress. The Fairy Queen replies that humans may chase material wealth, but elves do not. She admits they could invest but fears human nature. Endless greed for power has destroyed dynasties. Rain agrees her concern is valid, yet stresses ambition also drives human advancement. He cites the dream of flying that created airplanes and helicopters. The desire to dive like fish produced submarines, and the yearning for space birthed spacecraft. Rhine envisions a future where both stand atop skyscrapers, overlooking the prosperous city they built, witnessing civilization's transformation. The Fairy Queen falls silent, still puzzled by concepts like airplanes or submarines. She acknowledges Rain's rare faith and ambition, but reminds that elves restrain desire to keep peace, though she admits the plan may bring real benefits. Rain eagerly assures massive profits, asking her to witness the unfolding future firsthand. His words about altering fate shake the Queen deeply. She recalls the prophecy she saw in the crystal orb just days ago. That vision showed the elves' downfall, yet a chance of survival if she chose the right ally, and now Rain repeats the same message. She decides to take everything back to discuss with her people before giving an official answer. Rain expresses hope for their agreement for the common good of all sides. He then signals Leah to prepare something special. Soon after, Leah returns and hands the Queen a bundle of documents. She wonders what it contains. Rhine explains it is an honorary invitation to the new dam's inauguration, where she can witness industrial achievements and their envisioned future. At the same time, Rosalind waits impatiently in the Grand Hall. Upset, Rain has left her all day. She recalls the last battle, blaming her own weakness, fearing she lost Rain's trust, and unsure how to protect her family. The story flashes back to the day before, when Rosalind led cavalry toward Esling. On the road, a soldier reported Rain was safe and had been seen near the border fortress. Rosalind is surprised the city still stands despite Orvis' massive assault. She recalls rumors of a mysterious mage using forbidden magic to aid Rain, and resolves to meet him before losing another chance. Upon reaching the border, she immediately seeks out Rain. Rosalind claims to be sent by Lady Prisha to support him. She introduces herself as Rosalind Holker, admitting her late arrival and accepting any punishment from Rain. Rain, surprised, asks if Prisha truly sent her to help. Rosalind confirms, but Rain doubts her since she came from Orvis direction. She explains Prisha dispatched her 3 days earlier, believing Rain had been captured by 100,000 troops. Thus, she avoided the city and instead struck at the enemy's rear, sabotaging supplies to cause chaos. Rain is astonished she covered the long, rough distance from Prisha's domain in only 3 days without railways. Rosalind, confused, asks what a railway is, making Rain hurriedly change the subject. She declares absolute loyalty, feeling ashamed that her uncle once betrayed Rain. Rhine asks about her relationship with Caesar Holker. She admits she is Caesar's niece. She begs to bear any punishment in exchange for her family chance. She pleads forgiveness for the Holker, affirming their loyal devotion. Back to the present, Rosalind still worries since Rain hasn't replied or met her. When the meeting ends, Rain finally enters. He says he has kept her waiting long. He tells her not to be tense, then sits to discuss an agreement. Rosalind accepts at once, thinking this is the Holker family's chance to prove loyalty. Rain praises her talent and battlefield judgment, calling her an exceptional knight. He inwardly notes her absolute loyalty, seeing her as ideal for his goal. He commends her choice to strike the enemy's rear instead of the main road, proving both courage and intelligence. Rosalind humbly replies it was only her duty. Suddenly, Rain asks if she is willing to become his person. Rosalind blushes, misunderstanding he wants her body in exchange for her family's pardon. Rain immediately stops her, insisting she misunderstood. He emphasizes he never intended to use her that way. Rosalind cries, saying even sacrificing her body would be worth it if it serves Rain. Rain sternly corrects her, meaning he wants her as an ally at his side. Still doubtful, Rosalind asks again, unsure of his meaning. Rain explains the guilt lies with Caesar Holker, not the family, and wants her to serve as a knight. He formally proposes Rosalind join the army as gate commander and his right hand. Rosalind joyfully realizes she misunderstood. Rain only wanted a knight's loyalty. With resolve, she agrees to serve, calling it the greatest honor of her life. Afterward, Rain returns to his office. He writes to Priscia, reporting Esling safe, Castile defeated, and praising Rosalind as an outstanding knight, hoping she can stay long-term. Finishing the letter, Rain gives it to Leah along with the dam's inauguration invite, telling her to send it to Priscia, and Leah agrees. Rain thinks he has secured another solid step in his mission. He has won over one of the 5 key people, and believes the remaining 4 will appear soon. Then Leah mentions Duke Castile, asking Rain's plan since he hasn't met him yet. Rain suddenly recalls and asks where he is held. Leah replies Castile is imprisoned in Esling's dungeon. Rain immediately heads there to confront Castile. He greets coldly, mocking that the situation has reversed. Castile replies with a threat that Rain's luck is about to end. Rain frowns, asking why a prisoner dares to speak so boldly, or if he's gone mad from confinement. But Castile stays calm, hinting at a truth Rain's father never revealed. He mentions forbidden sorcerers. Rare, extremely dangerous mages who can change wars. He stresses that's why they are banned from combat, but insists Rain used one and broke the supreme law, dooming the Edgar family to be hunted. Rain immediately guesses he means Selena. Castile laughs mockingly, saying Selena is only a high mage, while the one who incinerated 100,000 with a single spell was the true forbidden sorcerer. Rain denies it, claiming he used oil to cause the explosion and could repeat it thousands of times without magic. Castile still disbelieves, insisting such destruction could only come from forbidden magic, and Rain has broken the law. Rain, irritated, calls the argument pointless, saying oil or magic makes no difference. He concludes the only fact that matters is Castile's defeat. Then Rain pauses and questions the mastermind behind it all, demanding Castile reveal who gave the orders. Castile blusters in defiance, but Rain exposes his lies, mocking him. Rain reveals he checked records and found Castile's army always attacked each spring. He analyzes the battles were only raids that retreated, proving a hidden motive. Rain deduces Castile is either insane or hiding a secret, and asserts it is the latter. Castile feigns amusement, claiming he only sought slaughter for fun, not poor land. Rain suspects and asks if Castile was experimenting on the people. Castile pales, showing panic at the exposure. Rain decides to keep him imprisoned for days to force a confession, certain the truth will surface. Leaving the dungeon, Rain still ponders, believing Castile's plot is tied to the city's fate. He reminds himself to prioritize industrial growth to create jobs and prevent corruption among the people. Days later, the scene shifts to Priscia Edgar. Priscia reads Rain's letter, mocking his affection for Willis' daughter, but not objecting. She orders Gwen to inform Willis his family is spared thanks to his daughter. Priscia mentions the dam inauguration invite, curious since she never knew such a concept. Gwen humbly admits she doesn't understand, praising Rain's superior intellect. Priscia decides to attend, seeing it as a good chance to meet her brother. Gwen obeys and begins preparing at once. Priscia playfully suggested summoning beauties to test Rain's taste. The scene shifts to the Orvis Palace, where nobles worry about Castile's failure and the risk of secrets leaking. A furious noble questions who ordered Castile to start the war on his own. The emperor interrupts, halting the useless quarrel. He declares it no longer matters who pushed Castile, but rather what to do now that he's captured. The king forbids the court from further meaningless disputes. Someone proposes sending envoys to Esling to seek an agreement. 2 nobles fiercely oppose, calling negotiations with Caradoriel a humiliation. A calm voice warns that secrets may leak if the issue is not handled carefully. He stresses that protecting secrets outweighs pride and begs the emperor to approve talks. The emperor agrees, saying the envoy must hold high status to show sincerity. He adds the envoy must be brave and sharp-witted, not careless. A noble secretly realizes the emperor has a deeper motive. He understands exactly whom the emperor intends to choose. The emperor looks at Cleven, urging him to name the right person. Cleven steps forward, confidently announcing his choice. He proposes Lady Vilvina, daughter of Duke Richard, as envoy. The court is shocked, protesting since her father is imprisoned for scandal. The emperor remains calm, inwardly praising Cleven for grasping his intent. He orders Cleven to explain clearly why Vilvina suits the mission. Cleven's first reason: Vilvina has Duke-level status, proving Orvis' seriousness. Second reason: she is of age, beautiful and intelligent, with charm and diplomatic skill. Final reason: her strong motive to save her father ensures full devotion. Nobles murmur, gradually agreeing Cleven's logic is sound. The emperor approves, assigning Cleven to protect Vilvina. He warns of danger and demands her safe return. Cleven accepts, feeling pity that Vilvina is dragged into palace schemes. The story shifts to that same evening. The emperor secretly summons someone into his private chamber. He orders preparations for when Castile and Vilvina return. An assassin appears, vowing to kill them both after leaving Esling. The emperor sinisterly sees the envoy's death as a pretext for war. The scene shifts to Esling's bustling market. Rain strolls leisurely, saying he only wants to observe common life. People cheer Rain, crediting him for bringing prosperity and safety. Rain thanks them, urging peace of mind in their work. He then quietly slips aside to sit and observe. He begins focusing his gaze, watching every face passing along the street. Rain reflects, realizing it's hard to find talent among commoners. He has wandered for days, seeking just one truly capable person. Rain grows weary from the fruitless search, briefly thinking of asking his sister for help. But he reminds himself that she also needs to keep manpower for her own domain. He recalls already requesting Roslyn from her, so now he can't ask for more and just sighs. Rain feels lost, unsure which path to take next. Seeing this, Leah approaches and embraces him to ease his tension. She advises him to rest, comforting that he doesn't need to shoulder everything alone. She also says she told the guards to search for talent, and is confident Rain will soon meet the right one. Rain is grateful but still doubtful, since guards only pick the strong, not true talent. He worries about lacking capital, failing to attract the elves' investment, and the dam project still unfinished. His plan to train alchemical mages failed because they were incompetent, unable to grasp basics. Rain clenches his fists, blaming an unfair system, calling the task impossible, then collapses in Leah's arms. Suddenly, a loud shout cuts through his thoughts. A shopkeeper yells at a man for useless goods. The scolded man panics, begging forgiveness, insisting this time the product won't fail. Rain immediately takes notice, using appraisal to see the man's extraordinary potential. He is stunned to find outstanding alchemy and potion-making skills, rejoicing at finding talent. The man confidently promotes a potion that preserves fruit for a year, solving spoilage issues. But the shopkeeper bluntly rejects him, showing no trust. He recalls being tricked before with insect repellent that ruined crates of apples, causing heavy losses. Armando hastily explains that potion only worked on soft fruit, not hard apples. The shopkeeper shoves him aside with more scolding, while Armando pleads to be heard. Rain watches, sensing Armando is truly special in this noisy scene. Leah grows uneasy, suspicious why her master focuses on an alchemist. She tells herself to stop Rain, fearing hell be fooled by typical alchemist tricks. Meanwhile, Armando panics, having sold nothing all day and starving. Rain suddenly steps forward and directly speaks to him. He shows interest, asking about the potions Armando has. Armando beams, thinking he has found a wealthy client, hoping for a good dinner tonight. He cheerfully shakes hands, introducing himself as a potion expert. Armando boasts he has all kinds of potions, ready to meet any need. Rain slowly questions further, wanting to know the man's origin and identity. Armando reveals he is a nomad, practicing his trade everywhere, now stopping here. Rain nods while Armando confidently claims he can brew any potion. Leah whispers a warning to Rain, saying this alchemist is suspicious and deceitful. Rain smiles, asserting he has already verified Armando will not betray him. Leah is utterly shocked, unable to grasp how Rain could confirm that at a first meeting. Rain points to a random vial, demanding Armando explain its use. Armando eagerly describes it as a potion that creates magical light in darkness. He continues with a blue vial that boosts speed and agility for hours. Finally, he flaunts a love vial, hinting it brings pleasure to both master and maid. Rain sneers, dismissing all of them as useless and inferior. Armando angrily warns him not to insult his potions. Leah retorts, mocking him for daring to threaten her young master over mere criticism. Armando backtracks, claiming he was only joking, not serious. Rain analyzes, exposing the use of toxic substances and suggesting safer, cheaper, and more effective compounds instead. Armando is stunned when Rain reveals the exact ingredients he used. Rain smiles, mocking that his secret formulas only leave his goods unsellable. He adds that his basic knowledge already surpasses Armando's craft and advises him to study seriously. Armando suspects Rain must have stolen notes to know so many details. Rain coldly denies it, saying those worthless formulas aren't worth stealing. He steps closer, offering Armando loyalty in exchange for a chance to learn true chemistry and improve his trade. Armando reacts harshly, demanding to know why he should listen to Rain. Leah steps forward, revealing Rain as the new Lord of Esling, youngest son of Grand Duke Alferia. Even after hearing this, Armando shows disdain, saying nobles are even more detestable. He declares he'd rather starve than serve the nobility. Rain calmly asks if Armando thinks they are deceiving him. Armando replies he dares not accuse nobles of lying, but he still refuses to submit. Leah bursts out angrily, demanding he apologize to her master or face consequences. Armando laughs scornfully, mocking nobles for relying only on violence, which enrages Leah, though she spares him in contempt. Rain steps in on time, advising not to waste words on quarrels. He candidly says Armando must have suffered deep wounds from nobles to develop such extreme hostility. Rain insists he doesn't care about the past, only wants to give Armando a chance to change his life. He reveals he possesses rare scientific knowledge, promising that learning even a little could transform the world. Rain warns that if Armando refuses, he will live a meaningless life and die forgotten. He presents two choices, one leading to glory and history, the other to obscurity and regret. Armando snaps, declaring he won't be swayed by fancy words. He bluntly accuses nobles of selfishness, treating commoners as trash, and vows never to trust Rain. Armando's hatred deepens, his loyalty plummets, making Rain realize the situation is dire. He concludes by fully rejecting Rain's words and swearing never to serve nobles. Suddenly, a young girl runs up, calling Armando affectionately. Armando is startled, asking why she's here. He sternly tells her to leave because the area is dangerous, confusing her. Armando explains that dangerous nobles are around, making even children unsafe. Irina shifts focus, smiling as she greets Rain. Rain is surprised that the girl recognizes him. She says the whole city knows him, that thanks to him, her family suffers less, and especially her mother often praises him. Ryan asks about her father, and Irina excitedly explains he once gambled, but after Ryan gave him a job, the family changed completely, living stable, happy, and hopeful. Armando interrupts angrily, accusing Rain of turning her father into a slave with meager wages, furious at noble cruelty to commoners. Rain calmly counters, asking what right Armando has to slander without knowing the truth. Armando points at Irina's ragged clothes, mocking that life is still miserable and accusing Rain of fake benevolence. Leah explodes, accusing Armando of blindness to Rain's role in reviving the city with faith and leadership. Irina quickly agrees, urging Armando to stop slandering Rain. She emphasizes Rain has provided jobs, shelter, and food for everyone, saving them from hunger and cold. Irina even threatens to stop playing with him if he continues, reminding him he never lived here to understand Rain's achievements. Rain interjects, explaining ragged clothes aren't due to his neglect. He analyzes that clothing requires an entire industry and promises once factories are built, everyone will dress well. Armando dismisses it, insisting nobles only hoard wealth and never truly care for people. Irina protests, insisting Rain is a good man and begging Armando not to insult him anymore. Armando walks away, warning Irina to stay away from nobles since they're dangerous despite pretending kindness, and their nature never changes. Rain watches Armando leave, regretting not wanting to lose such a rare talent. He resolves to keep Armando at any cost, just as he steps forward to stop him. Suddenly, his body trembles violently. Then he collapses to the ground, completely unconscious. When he wakes, Rain realizes he is back in his room. The familiar setting confirms he is inside the mansion. Leah rejoices, admitting she was terrified when he collapsed. Rain reassures her, saying he feels well again. Leah cries while scolding him for overworking despite her many warnings. Rain gently holds her hand, apologizes, and promises to care for his health. He immediately asks Leah where Armando is now. She explains that when he fainted, everyone brought him straight home. Surprisingly, Armando, who had been leaving, actually came back. He didn't hesitate to help when he saw Rain collapse. Rain is utterly astonished at this news. Leah confirms, adding that Armando also gave her a supportive potion before quietly leaving. Rain wonders if Leah gave him that potion, making him recover so quickly. Leah sternly says she would never take such a reckless risk. She explains she brought in a renowned doctor, while keeping Armando's potion aside, knowing Rain would care. Rain wants to examine it himself, so Leah fetches it while urging him to rest. Holding the vial, Rain studies it carefully, noting its refinement beyond expectations. He sees it's far different from common potions and decides to have it analyzed by a doctor tomorrow. Leah hesitates, asking why Rain is so determined to recruit Armando despite his rudeness and contempt for nobles. Rain calmly answers that Armando is an unpolished genius, a rough gem that could become Esling's treasure. In his heart, Rain knows Armando hates nobles due to deep scars, and he must uncover the cause to win him over. The story shifts to Armando's home. Armando gazes at a portrait, murmuring that today he met an unusual noble. He recounts to his late teacher that Rain dissected his formula at a glance, stayed calm, unlike typical nobles, and even Irina sided with him. He admits he cannot comprehend this man, yet insists he won't be fooled by nobles' false kindness. Armando recalls his hatred from his teacher's death at the cruel hands of nobles, a grudge that never fades. He vows he'd rather die than serve them, and promises to finish his teacher's unfinished research. Armando believes once the project is complete, he can both aid commoners and exact revenge, since the innovation will break the divide between nobles and peasants. The story shifts to his teacher, Liesl Grant, once among Esling's greatest alchemists 15 years ago. With extraordinary talent, she became famous everywhere, yet used her work only to aid the poor, affirming that true alchemists must serve the community, not the wealthy elite. Liesl once adopted an orphan, who was Armando. She devotedly taught him knowledge and loved him like her own child, helping him grow in both skill and character. Their bond was so deep that everyone thought they were truly mother and son. Liesl taught him not only medicine but also morality, stressing that living without serving the common good was no different from being useless. But her dedication angered the nobility, as she became a symbol in the people's hearts. Branded a thorn, she was constantly threatened, yet kept helping the poor until a noble from Esling sent soldiers to her home with cruel intent. They destroyed all her research, falsely accused her of using forbidden magic, and killed her under that pretext, while the law turned a blind eye under noble influence. At that time, Armando was only 15, powerless as he watched his devoted mentor branded a menace and die unjustly. From then on, he studied the remaining notes, vowing to fulfill her will and erase the divide between commoners and nobles. Isera told Rain, crying, that Armando's face was filled with rage, which pained her to see a child bearing such a burden. Rain was moved, but insisted the original question was still unanswered, saying the touching story did nothing for his problem. He repeated that all he wanted to know was Armando's whereabouts, which the long tale still hadn't revealed. Isera reproached Rain for being heartless, but he calmly replied that pity or not, the past would not change and should best be forgotten. Rain argued that clinging to the past only holds people back. To go far, one must leave it behind and move forward. Finally, Isera revealed that Armando often visited Liesl's old house, where all her equipment and research notes were still kept. Rain was glad, as this confirmed Armando was still around the city, making it easier to meet him soon. Then he suddenly asked Isera if she knew what Liesl had researched that so terrified the nobility. She admitted she only remembered the project's name, which sounded confusing. But her vague memory showed it was related to steam, which shocked Rain deeply. He immediately made her repeat it to be sure. Isera anxiously repeated she only recalled the word steam, then asked why it was so important. Rain affirmed it could be a revolutionary invention, powerful enough to erase the gap between the poor and the nobles. Era was astonished, confessing she had always thought that project was nothing significant. Rain excitedly grabbed her hand, insisting they must meet Armando at once, while Isera was surprised at being dragged along like a cart. In Rain's mind was only one guess. Liesl must have researched the steam engine and surely left detailed notes and experiments. Rain recalled his past life, admitting he had never seriously studied steam engines, but believed with basic theory he could recreate it using his mechanical knowledge. With his engineering expertise, he was confident that just by observing the structure, he could deduce the operating principles. He noticed that transportation infrastructure in this world was poor, making trade extremely inconvenient. Although he once had the idea of creating an engine, he lacked blueprints and gave up, but now if he obtained Liesl's notes, he was certain he could rebuild it. He envisioned sparking an industrial revolution, convinced that once he proved the practical benefits, the people would support it. The story then shifted to Armando. He was focused on tinkering with a steam engine. Suddenly, Rain knocked and called from outside, startling him. Panicked, Armando hurriedly hid the machine, vowing never to let his teacher's treasure fall into noble hands. When he opened the door, he scowled and drove Rain away, declaring he was unwelcome. Rain grew serious, stating directly that he only wanted to see Liesl's research notes. Armando snarled in denial and tried to block Rain from advancing further. He firmly swore never to hand over the notes, as he did not trust him and feared they would be destroyed by nobles again. At that moment, Isera quickly stepped in to mediate. She gently explained that Rain was unlike other nobles, but someone who wanted to use the research to improve life for everyone. but Armando remained tense, drawing a knife in defense. He warned Rain to leave this sacred place or he would be forced to strike. Leah, who had been watching, silently resolved to protect her master from any threat. She was ready to attack if Armando charged with the knife, but Rain raised his hand to stop her. He calmly reassured Leah that he could handle it himself. Moving closer, Rain stared directly at Armando, speaking each word firmly. He mocked that Armando lacked the ability to understand Liesel's legacy and that what he was doing only wasted her life's work. These words triggered Armando's furious outburst. Rain bluntly declared that Armando was incapable of continuing Liesel's legacy, saying even in a lifetime he would never finish, and the project would remain buried. Armando raged, mocking that Rain knew nothing about the research and was just a foolish noble who couldn't grasp scientific value. Rain calmly countered, challenging Armando to a wager to prove who truly understood. Armando was surprised and asked exactly what Rain wanted to bet. Rain explained that the goal Armando had pursued for so long still hadn't succeeded, showing how difficult it was, and that Armando's progress was minimal. He proposed the bet. If he could make the machine work, Armando must obey and work for him. But if he failed, he would leave the city forever, stressing Armando had no reason to refuse. Armando burst out laughing, treating Rain's proposal as a joke, saying he had never seen anyone so foolish. He mocked Rain as a useless playboy noble who had achieved nothing in life, yet dared to boast about handling complex mechanics. He emphasized that even with years of study since age 15, guided by his teacher's knowledge and practical experience, he still failed. So Rain was even more hopeless. Rain calmly replied that since Armando was so spirited, he would take it as agreement and suggested starting the challenge immediately to decide the winner. Armando nodded but said the wager needed more tension. He added a condition. If Rain lost, he must not only leave the city but also kneel before Liesel's grave to apologize on behalf of all nobles. Only if Rain accepted would the bet be valid. Isera intervened, urging Armando not to lump everyone together, stressing that Rain was different from the nobles who had harmed him, and that driving him away would mean the city lost its greatest hope. Armando replied that Rain was the one who initiated the wager. If he was afraid, he could withdraw, but Armando was fully confident of victory and saw this as Rain's fatal mistake. Rain accepted all the conditions, even promising that if he lost he would kneel and apologize not only at Liesel's grave, but also in the town square. He firmly declared he would not fail, urging Armando to quickly show him the engine so he could inspect its structure. As he examined it, Rain thought that never since his reincarnation had he been mocked so much. Yet he was certain building this engine was as easy as turning his hand, and he would make Armando work hard if he won. At that moment, Armando pulled off the cover, introducing it as his teacher's final relic and demanding the utmost care. Leah found the machine strange and incomprehensible, while Isera was also confused, only guessing it must be precious since it excited Rain so much. Rain touched it gently, barely believing that before him stood the engine capable of bringing humanity into the industrial age. He silently revered it, thinking that if Liesel were alive he would have kissed her hand, as geniuses in this century were rare. But then his heart grew heavy, remembering that she was gone. Leah noticed his satisfied expression and asked if the invention was truly that great. Rain affirmed its revolutionary potential, praising Liesel as a rare prodigy who could have changed humanity if only supported by the right people. Armando was moved, agreeing wholeheartedly, and praising his teacher as an extraordinary genius far beyond the mediocre alchemists. Rain reminded him that he had persevered for years, even selling medicine everywhere to fund the dream of completing the machine. Armando admitted the machine consumed enormous resources, and with the final guidance lost when soldiers destroyed the notes, he could only work blindly, not even knowing its true function. Rain reassured that he understood and needed to open it to check inside for errors, but Armando angrily shouted that Rain was insane. Armando insisted this was his teacher's last legacy, that if disassembled it could never be reassembled, and swore never to let Rain touch it. Rain calmly countered that if Armando lacked confidence, he would never succeed, while he himself had the skills to fix any kind of machine. He was confident he would prove his true ability. He demanded a screwdriver to loosen the bolts, leaving Armando puzzled, asking what that was. Rain was shocked, mocking Armando for not knowing a basic tool yet dreaming of completing an engine, comparing him to a man rowing endlessly without reaching shore. Armando defended himself, saying magic could unscrew it too, while worrying that Rain would ruin his teacher's design. He reminded that his teacher once worked with master dwarven craftsmen, taking 7 years to build this machine, so he refused to let a reckless noble like Rain touch it. Rain grew irritated, thinking the guy refused to help while spouting insults against nobles. He turned to Leah, asking for a dagger of the right size, and she immediately complied. Rain used the dagger as a screwdriver and began loosening the bolts. While working, he sighed inwardly that pushing this world forward was truly difficult, when even unscrewing bolts became a major problem. After finishing, he examined the machine's interior, growing increasingly amazed by its intricacy. But suddenly he froze. He realized a crucial component was missing, likely the reason the machine would not run. Rain turned to ask Armando about the missing part, stressing it was the core piece. Armando was stunned, panicking since only he knew that fact. He tried to deny it, accusing Rain of making things up, urging him to admit failure. Rain cursed inwardly that the guy thought he was a fool since the flaw was obvious. Rain declared that without this missing component, Armando would never succeed. He sternly demanded Armando reveal where the part was, otherwise they could not proceed. Armando, exhausted, admitted the part once existed but had long been stolen by a noble. Rain was shocked to hear the engine's core had been stolen, wondering why a noble would care. Armando explained the core contained rare dragon ore, which a powerful noble seized, deeming it wasted there. That man melted the core and recast it into a statue to flaunt his status in the city. Rain was horrified that it had been turned into a statue. He raged, cursing that man for destroying a marvel just for show. Rain furiously demanded to know the name of that fool. Armando coldly said it was useless, since no noble would dare oppose another, not even Rain. Rain sneered, surprised to hear there was someone in this city beyond his reach. He demanded Armando name the one blocking his dream of industrialization. Armando trembled, finally revealing the culprit was Duke Esco. Isera was stunned, asking again in disbelief if Esco was really behind it. Rain noticed her strange reaction and asked what connection she had with Esco. Isera admitted she knew him well, as he was once a minor noble in Esling. At first powerless, but thanks to his outstanding alchemy, he quickly rose to fame. At the Alchemy Congress, Esco represented the nation, won brilliantly, and was granted resources and a noble title. Rain wanted to know where Esco's domain was. Isera said he ruled the Granzer region, originally part of their territory. Leah interjected, stating Granzer belonged to Archduke Eldro, so House Edgar could not interfere, and confronting Esco could trigger war. Rain suddenly recalled his father's words, that his father and Eldro were fierce rivals, with extremely tense relations, so touching Granzer would certainly ignite war. Leah agreed with Rain, explaining that Eldro and his father always opposed each other ideologically to the point the Emperor had to keep them apart. Rain realized that going against Esco would inevitably involve Eldro, turning a small matter into a great war. He decided to endure for now, waiting for the right moment to strike with a world-shaking blow. With icy eyes, Rain vowed to make Esco pay for stealing what was his. Isera stepped forward to dissuade him, warning not to rush into war or risk losing the elves' hard-earned trust. Rain affirmed he would not blindly plunge into war, but Esco would certainly be punished for his crimes and for envying Liesel, whose talent surpassed his. Armando anxiously asked if Rain truly intended to provoke Esco, fearing he would lose his life to hatred. Rain reassured him, making two solemn vows. First, the steam engine would be completed. Second, Esco would face retribution, and Liesel would be honored as she deserved. After that, Rain stressed the need to focus on repairing the machine, asking Armando if there might be a sketchbook of his teachers containing the engine's designs. Armando sorrowfully said there were no sketches left, only a few notes already lost, and he only knew a little about the machine. He mentioned one person who fully understood it, the dwarf Bram, who once forged its components. Rain was overjoyed, thinking that finding Bram would make restoring the engine possible. But Armando warned Bram always refused to help, blaming the parts he crafted for causing Liesel's death. Rain calmly asserted he would find a way even if Bram refused to cooperate. Armando cautioned Rain to be prepared, as Bram was eccentric and unpredictable. When they went to see him, Bram angrily drove them out, saying his small room could not hold them. Isera stepped forward to plead, stressing that Rain was different from the nobles before, as he had already brought benefits to Esling. Bram looks at Rain, saying he has heard much about the young lord's good reputation. However, he stresses that being good is not enough to fix everything, as the city is more complex than Rain thinks. Isera counters that Rain has already proven himself in a short time, and with support, he will reform Esling in 5 years. Bram replies that the lord is only doing his duty, nothing noble worth praising. Rain nods, agreeing that a lord's duty is to care for the people, which is why he seeks Bram to do more. Bram is surprised that Rain accepts his view, thinking it rare among nobles. Finally, he asks what Rain wants his help with. Rain frankly asks Bram to reforge the gears for the steam engine once built by Liesel. Bram is utterly shocked upon hearing this. Bram firmly declares he will never forge those gears again. Rain is surprised and asks why forging gears is dangerous. Bram sternly explains that the dragon crystal gears attracted nobles, indirectly leading to Liesel's murder. He says he will never repeat that mistake, refusing to cause more deaths by his hands. Armando angrily criticizes Bram for shirking duty after scolding the Lord for not doing enough. Bram responds firmly, insisting he won't be provoked by words. He stands his ground, refusing to forge the gears and stressing the lack of dragon crystals as a major obstacle. Rain calmly asks if gears must use dragon crystals or if alternatives exist. Bram frowns, wanting to know what Rain is implying. Rain suggests trying ordinary iron, relying on Bram's skill instead of rare ore. Bram snaps, calling Rain ignorant, since only ancient dragons can melt iron. He insists no human on the continent can generate heat high enough for that. Rain reflects on the breath of ancient dragons, which can reach terrifying heat. He admits current forges cannot melt iron, so the idea is blocked. Bram stresses that not just his forge, but the entire world is powerless, urging Rain to give up. Rain acknowledges that truth but poses a challenge. If he builds a hot enough forge, will Bram help craft the parts? Bram freezes, thinking success would revolutionize smithing but still doubts. He tells himself Rain is just a naive noble who knows nothing of forging, likely bluffing. Bram bluntly says many masters failed with this idea, though if a miracle happened, smithing would enter a new era. But he sees Rain's words as boasting. Rain smiles challengingly, proposing a wager. If he makes an iron forge, Bram must craft the parts for Liesel's machine. Bram, intrigued, agrees that if Rain succeeds, he will forge every needed part with full effort. Rain secretly feels confident it's within reach. Rain seals the deal, promising to bring Bram the best forge of his life. Before he leaves, Bram warns that if he fails, he must never return. He stresses this is the last chance, after which all ties will be cut. Rain calculates that he must reach 1538 to melt iron ore, while the old forge barely reached half that. He identifies the main issue as lack of oxygen flow and concludes he must add an auxiliary air system to double the heat. Without hesitation, Rain grabs a nearby hammer. Then he begins smashing the forge, preparing for a complete overhaul. Azira and Armando gape as he destroys Bram's forge. Ira panics, warning that Bram will explode with rage if he sees this. Armando hastily reminds them that Bram treats the forge like his child, and if it breaks, their bond is over. Rain calmly reassures them, saying he's not destroying but upgrading. Then he drills 2 holes straight into the forge. He explains that the added airflow will boost oxygen and hydrogen, making the fire burn twice as strong, enough to melt iron. Azira, still puzzled, asks if such a small change could really work. Rain smiles, saying that's the power of science. Small changes bring great leaps. At that moment, Bram arrives carrying piles of iron ore. As soon as he sees the forge drilled, he freezes in shock, shouting at Rain about what he has done to his life's work. Bram, furious, says Rain has ruined his lifelong dedication in an instant. Rain remains calm, explaining he only upgraded the forge and will prove it with results. Bram still rages, yelling that Rain can't treat smithing like a joke. The old smith angrily accuses Rain of ruining the tool, making metallurgy nearly impossible. Rain patiently urges him to test it instead of dismissing it outright. Bram reluctantly agrees, only to prove Rain wrong. Grumbling, he throws iron into the forge to test. Everyone watches the process anxiously. Bram is stunned as something unusual happens. Against all expectations, the forge successfully melts iron. Azira and Armando are astonished, unable to believe the result. Everyone curiously asks how Rain managed the improvement. Rain smiles provocatively, asking Bram if he has anything left to say. Bram freezes, unable to argue further. Finally, he admits it and asks how Rain achieved such a feat. Rain reveals he applied principles from the aviation field to the forge. He immediately requests Bram to forge a gear for him. Bram laughs and agrees, acknowledging Rain's talent. However, he warns that nobles may target him. He reminds Rain of the lesson from Liesel, who once underestimated the powerful. Rain asserts that the truly fearsome one is him, and he will face them directly. Then he approaches the steam engine. In his hand, he holds the gear forged by Bram. He believes this is the missing piece to make the engine work. Rain confidently declares the industrial era is about to begin. Leah observes, worried the gear looks a bit small. She fears it might break and endanger Rain when installed. Ira agrees with Leah, suggesting they wait to use sturdier dragon crystal instead. Rain reassures them that a steam engine only needs iron gears, not dragon crystal. Armando both praises the invention and sternly forbids Rain from belittling his master. Rain reminds him of the wager, warning Armando he will soon become a subordinate. Armando stands firm, saying he will only accept once he sees the machine run. Rain confidently installs the gear into place. He declares that everyone is about to witness a miracle. Soon after, Rain starts the machine. The engine immediately spews smoke. Era bursts with joy, saying Rain achieved what no one else has in 15 years. Armando is stunned, unable to believe the result. With tears falling, he whispers his master's name. He is moved that the long wait has finally ended. The story suddenly shifts to Armando's past. Images of him working tirelessly beside his master return. He labors and learns under her devoted guidance. Liesel once confided that this project would free humanity from suffering, her lifelong ideal. In her dying moments, Liesel entrusted the dream to Armando, asking him to finish it for her. Back in the present, Armando breaks down in sobs. He chokes up, admitting he failed many times, but now his master's dream has finally come true. Azera tries to comfort him, but Rain stops her. He explains those are tears of happiness, and the more he cries, the lighter he feels. Time passes 3 hours later. Bram approaches, still unable to believe Rain restored the engine. He even jokes that it looks no different from a smoke machine. Azera laughs skeptically, asking if the machine has any use besides spouting smoke. Bram makes up a battlefield theory, claiming it could scare enemies with smoke, while Rain quietly praises Liesel's far-sighted vision. Rain corrects them seriously, declaring they are all mistaken. He announces this is a steam engine, the foundation of the industrial age. Bram is deeply shocked and asks Era, but she doesn't know, only trusting Rain's words. Rain continues, explaining the engine is a power source that drives machines. From manufacturing and transportation to the military, it can all be used. He emphasizes it is the energy pillar of the entire society. This will be a lifelong invention, but it is only the beginning. Era cheerfully praises Rain as a great genius. Bram scratches his head doubtfully, yet eagerly asks Rain to share more about the technique. Rain reassures him, promising that once the engine is done, he will prioritize helping him first. He reveals his ambition to turn the land into a hub where industry and magic coexist. While Rain is passionately speaking, Rosalind suddenly appears. He announces that Prisha has just entered Rain's domain. Hearing this, Rain is overjoyed at the arrival of his sister. He immediately thinks of asking her to fund his project, seeing it as a golden chance. Rosalind says Prisha has a special gift for Rain and wants to hand it over personally. Rain gets excited, convinced she must have brought a mountain of gold. Rosalind unexpectedly reveals that Prisha also brought a troupe of beautiful young women, teasing that they suit Rain's taste. Rain is dumbfounded, never expecting such a bizarre gift. Soon after, he returns to the manor to meet his sister. Prisha warmly greets him, teasing that she has missed Rain greatly. Rain smiles back but immediately turns to serious matters. He directly points at the women behind her, asking the reason she brought them. Prisha only grins mischievously without answering. She teases whether her brother truly dislikes every one of them. Rain hastily denies it, trying to explain clearly. He grows upset as people's looks toward him change, as if in contempt. Prisha is surprised to hear that the townsfolk dare to look down on their lord. Rain knows she is only pretending while his reputation, especially with Leah, has crumbled. He pleads with her to stop, saying Leah alone already glares at him like bullets. Prisha smiles again, claiming that proves Leah genuinely cares. Rain helplessly begs her to be quiet since every word feels like a trap. He presses her to tell the truth about why she brought them. Prisha finally admits it all stems from a letter Rain once sent. Rain is stunned, unable to recall which letter she means. Prisha insists it was a letter where he expressed liking Rosalind, so she sought other options for him. Rain panics and corrects her, saying she completely misunderstood. He only wanted to invite Rosalind for her talent, not romance. Prisha bursts out laughing, confessing her mistake, but adding that she too finds Rosalind attractive, and even if Rain truly liked him, it wouldn't be wrong. Then she suddenly asks Leah whether she would accept if Rain took another wife, forcing Rain to intervene. Leah calmly answers that as a maid, she has no right to interfere in her master's personal affairs. But then she sighs, admitting that thanks to Prisha, she recalled something that left her deeply shaken. Rain quickly reassures Leah that it was only a joke and she need not worry. Prisha notices Leah's trembling hands, realizing the girl is truly sincere toward Rain, so she decides not to tease further. She orders Gwen to take all the young women away, ending the prank. After that, Rain leads his sister to the study. He eagerly introduces the dam project, highlighting irrigation benefits and hydroelectric power. Prisha is puzzled, thinking hydroelectricity is just a form of water magic. Rain patiently explains it is a way to turn water flow into energy for machines. Even so, Prisha worries whether it can really end famine. Rain affirms it can since irrigation will improve crop yields. Prisha sits listening, appearing very impressed. She praises him but is surprised, as Rain used to be lazy in studies and obsessed with swordsmanship. Prisha suspects something unusual has happened to her brother and demands the truth. Rain feels uneasy, recalling he is not truly Rain Edgar, but someone who transmigrated into this body after it was gravely injured. Now it makes sense. The wound came from overtraining in swordsmanship. Rain realizes he must come up with a convincing reason, or Prisha's suspicion could be dangerous. He maintains a calm smile, saying he quit training after the injury and turned to books, discovering knowledge can be as powerful as the sword. Prisha recalls Alice's letter, noting Rain once spent months buried in study when unable to move. She skeptically asks if he has read the entire library and wants to know exactly which book taught him about dams and energy. Rain hands her his notebook, claiming it as the valuable source of knowledge. Prisha immediately opens it. She is astonished to see complex theories of mechanics and metallurgy, proving Rain wasn't lying. She smiles, praising her brother for turning academic knowledge into practice. Rain grows a bit embarrassed, admitting he neglected swordsmanship due to too many projects. Prisha gently says she understands all his hardships. She advises against pushing sword training, warning it could endanger his life, with safety being most important. She stresses that since childhood the family only wanted to protect Rain, and now seeing him grown, she feels both proud and worried out of love. Rain smiles reassuringly, saying he is already strong enough to manage thanks to everyone's support. Prisha, moved, nods joyfully. She promises that no matter the circumstances, she will always stand by his side and support him whenever needed. Hearing this, Rain is deeply touched and decides to voice a long-held wish. Then he frankly asks his sister for help with a major undertaking.